Chapter 499. Although they had always wanted to strengthen the demonic god guild and make it rise again, the demonic god guild had always been shameful ever since the server started. This time was no exception. Their idea was not bad. They would swing over by the ropes on the mast and start the next battle. However, the problem was that the merchant ships in this world were all protected by protective shields. There was no such thing as a next battle in the sea. Therefore, the demonic god guild's demonic god guild were defeated again. They were eliminated right at the beginning. The demonic god guild's demonic god guild had always been very good at embarrassing themselves. At this moment, even Mo Lang, who was standing on the leading merchant ship, could not help but be stunned. When he saw countless ship spirits baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, he was very anxious. However, at this moment, the fear in his heart was suddenly washed away. At this moment, a large number of players' warships approached from behind. Seeing this, Mo Lang immediately turned around and roared, "Turn around quickly! Also, release a messenger bird and send back the news that we've encountered a pirate ship." Mo Lang knew that it was impossible to negotiate with the sudden enemy attack. He had already revealed his identity as a member of the West Continent Trade Union. Since the other party still dared to attack, it meant that they were coming for them. At this moment, he was extremely nervous. The resources on the ship were all requested by Smoke Dragon. If they were lost, although the Underworld Trade Union would send the War Trade Union to deal with them, they would still have to give another batch of resources to the Smoke Dragon Trade Union. At this moment, the players' fleet was gradually approaching. Naturally, the players behind were not as reckless as the Demonic God Guild's Demonic God Guild. They directly controlled the ship and rammed it into the merchant ship. Boom! The first warship collided with Mo Lang's warship. Instantly, the dragon horn of the player's warship was broken. However, at this moment, the giant 8-tentacled beast above the warship waved its tentacles and firmly fixed Mo Lang's merchant ship on the spot. The dark green protective shield appeared again, but the giant 8-tentacled beast was still tightly wrapped around the ship, preventing it from retreating. As the players' warships arrived, Mo Lang's merchant ship was completely surrounded. Fire! Countless sorcerers turned into water cannons and swept the merchant ship's protective shield with their beautiful skills, causing countless waves on it. Under such circumstances, Mo Lang was extremely anxious. Although he had already released the signal bird, he felt that he would not be able to last until reinforcement arrived. As the barrier of the merchant ship dimmed, a crack suddenly appeared. Kacha! In an instant, the protective barrier on the surface of the merchant ship shattered into countless white lights that fell like raindrops. At this moment, the eyes of the players instantly turned red. They were blinded by the points, soul coins, and experience in front of them. One after another, the player battleships crashed into the merchant ship that Mo Lang was on, creating large holes in the ship's hull. A large amount of seawater poured in. Under such circumstances, other than being anxious, Mo Lang did not know what to do. His own strength had barely reached the level of a ghost commander. In the face of such a large-scale attack, he felt that he was useless. Under the thunderous clouds, the players continued to attack. After completely surrounding the 8 merchant ships, the players started the first wave of punishment with overwhelming numbers and strength. As the protective shields of the merchant ships were broken, the seawater sank the merchant ships one by one. At this time, the players suddenly jumped into the sea like crazy. At this moment, a large number of wooden barrels were floating on the surface of the sea. There was wine, food, and even spirit materials. How could the players not be envious of these resources? The final harvest was the harvest of resources. At this moment, all the players had the same thought. Plundering was such a goddamn profit. It was simply a windfall of riches. Thinking of how they wanted to learn from the sea merchants to earn money, the players felt that they were too weak. At this moment, Mo Lang wanted to cry, but had no tears. He carried a barrel of spirit materials and floated on the surface of the water. Looking at the players who were plundering resources, he clenched his teeth in anger. ***, put down the barrel in your hand. At this time, a few players swam toward Mo Lang. Mo Lang's face turned pale when he saw that. However, he still decisively abandoned the barrel, dived into the water, and snuck toward the direction of the Kolong Ocean. These players did not choose to continue chasing after him. After all, compared to Mo Lang, resources were obviously more important. From a moment they discovered each other to the end of the battle, it only took half an hour. However, under the attack of the players, the merchant ship led by Mo Lang could not withstand such a fierce attack at all. All the resources were plundered by the players. After a while, the cheers of the players resounded in the sea. Pictures of people hugging wooden barrels filled with spiritual materials, as well as pictures of people holding wooden barrels and drinking wine, were posted on the forum. They immediately aroused the envy of countless players and aroused their passion. The players' first sanction against the sea merchants was a complete victory. A day later, on the Black Reef Island, Yin Long looked at Mo Lang, the elder of the West Continent's Chamber of Commerce, standing in front of him. His expression was extremely ugly. "Is everything you said true?" Mo Lang's body trembled when he heard that. "President Yin Long, everything I said is true. Moreover, I know which force robbed us." "Speak." The player clan is a new force that appeared in the Void Ocean in recent years. Their strength is not to be underestimated. Back then, the Sea King was defeated by them. Mo Lang quickly answered. "The Sea King? You mean the king of the Mute Sea Nation in the Kolong Ocean?" Yin Long was shocked. "That's right. Before the Mute Sea Nation was established, he was the overlord of the Void Ocean. It was because of the battle with the player clan that he was forced to leave the Void Ocean and settle down in the Kolong Ocean." Mo Lang immediately nodded. Hearing this, the smoke dragon nodded. "I'll settle this. You just need to go back and prepare the resources. Next time, I'll personally send someone to escort you. As for the player clan, I'll make them pay." When Mo Lang heard this, although he was resentful, he still hurriedly nodded. In fact, the Western Continent Commerce Guild had been in contact with the player clan many times. At that time, the player clan did not have any malicious intent towards them. Hence, the Western Continent Commerce Guild always thought that the Void Ocean had only changed its ruler. However, to them, who were protected by the Acheron Chamber of Commerce, it did not matter. No matter who the ruler was, they would not be threatened. However, the player clan's attack this time really frightened the Western Continent Commerce Guild. Since the player clan had chosen to wage war against them, it was obvious that they no longer cared about the Acheron Chamber of Commerce behind them. At this moment, the Western Continent Commerce Guild only wanted the player clan to be eliminated as soon as possible. Otherwise, it would be difficult for them to move an inch in the Void Ocean. However, since Yin Long had made a promise, the pressure in Mo Lang's heart was instantly reduced. He bowed slightly to show his respect and turned to leave. After Mo Lang left, Yin Long frowned and asked his subordinate standing at the side, "Is there any information about the player clan among the information you brought?" The subordinate who was in charge of sorting out the information immediately nodded. "President, the player clan only appeared recently. It seems that they're a force on land in the direction of Baiki. They have only officially joined the Battle of the Sea in recent years. By the way, the force that you killed during the meeting the other day was the player clan." Oh, at the thought of the player clan, Yin Long suddenly thought of the uniform turn and middle finger. His face could not help but turn pale. "So, the reason why the player clan robbed the Western Continent Commerce Guild is because of me?" Previously, the Western Continent Commerce Guild did not have any battle with the player clan in the Void Ocean, so there's a high probability that it is related to this. They are courting death. Yin Long's eyes flashed with ferocity. To him, this kind of revenge was not painful at all. However, since the player clan dared to provoke the Smoke Dragon Commerce Guild, he naturally would not let them off easily. Thinking of this, Yin Long said in a deep voice, "Send the first team to escort the next batch of supplies from the Western Continent Commerce Guild. Then mobilize the second, third, fourth, and fifth teams to search for the player clan in the Kolong Ocean and the Void Ocean. Eliminate all of them as long as they are found." "Yes," the subordinate immediately answered and then turned to leave. At this moment, a smile appeared on Yin Long's face again. He was waiting for the moment when the player clan would personally come to beg for mercy soon. The news of the Smoke Dragon Commerce Guild declaring war on the player clan spread like wildfire in the Kwelong Ocean. All the major forces received the news. During this period, some were happy while others were sad. The happiest was none other than the allied forces of Langi Island. As enemies, they were equally troubled by the player clan. This time, the fact that the player clan had offended the Smoke Dragon Commerce Guild was definitely good news for them. Now that the Smoke Dragon Commerce Guild was personally involved, they believed that the player clan was not far from being annihilated. On the other hand, the forces that were on good terms with the player clan were worried. They usually relied on the player clan's transportation to obtain resources at a cheaper price than the Commerce Guild. In their eyes, the player clan's current situation was not optimistic at all. Of course, there were also those who were extremely calm. The Sea King was the typical example. From a Sea King's point of view, it was easy to defeat the player clan with just the few fleets of the Smoke Dragon Commerce Guild. However, the possibility of defeating the player clan was extremely low. Back when he was dominating the Void Ocean, he had also waged war with the player clan. Similarly, he had sent out countless elite naval forces to sink the player clan's warships that they encountered in the ocean. However, the result was that he was defeated. The Sea King was full of anticipation for this battle. He wanted to see if the player clan could create another miracle and defeat the Smoke Dragon Commerce Guild that was far more powerful than them. After the players heard the news, they appeared extremely calm. They even felt like laughing. From their point of view, everyone knew how to talk tough. Didn't Chana say that he wanted to destroy us? Now he's been refined and is following Hui the Great Demon King to conquer the European server. Didn't the Rock Ghost King and the Hydra King say that they wanted to destroy us? Now they're living a life of retirement in the Mansion of the Dead, playing cards, drinking tea, and refining pills every day. Didn't the Lord of Shaotian Island say that he wanted to destroy us? Now he is doing odd jobs for Tonghua in the Mansion of the Dead. He was forced to learn forging and was forced to accept the inheritance of forging in order to share Tonghua's pain. Also, the Nine Yao brothers always said that they would take down Beiki in a few days. Then, they did it for a few days. Half a year later, they wiped out Beiki again and again. Grass must be growing on their graves by now. Among the hostile forces that talked tough to the players, the Sea King was the only one who persisted until the end. Although his subordinates, the Sea King Navy and his eldest brother, Mu Zhiguang, were destroyed, and he was living a miserable life, he was still struggling to grow. Now, he had turned the tables and rebuilt the Mu Taisi nation. Therefore, the players were extremely calm in the face of the Smoke Dragon's threats. Some players who were even more outrageous had already started betting with soul coins on the forum, betting on when the Smoke Dragon clan would be destroyed. At the same time, the players were also ready to continue the sanctions. They wanted to show the forces of the Void Ocean and the Kwelong Ocean how tough the player clan was. We, the player clan, will lose if we don't kill the Smoke Dragon clan until the end. Chapter 500. The sea battle began in the next few days. The players' pirate army attacked the Void and Kwelong Ocean. This time, their main target was all the sea merchants, especially the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association. For this reason, the Empress, the Navy commander, was also invited by the players. In the form of paying soul coins for employment, he participated in this sea battle and personally commanded the players' pirate regiment in the battle. She even set up a battle command center for this. At this stage, the players were very enthusiastic. With many successful, plundering, and great harvest photos posted on the forum, the popularity of the sea battle continued to rise. The competition between the players on the One Piece total points leaderboard gradually intensified. At the west of Beiki, the Rahu clan, who occupied the land of the Nine Luminaries, had no intention of waging war against Beiki. Hence, the players had nothing to worry about and were fully immersed in the plundering war. The strategy section of the forum became the core communication platform for this war. At the same time, the European server players also officially joined the war. Countless fleets of a European server followed the original players into the Void Ocean and began the plundering war, just like the original players. After a few successful plundering and harvesting a huge amount of resources, the European server players went crazy. At this moment, they finally understood that the original forum was not joking when they said that plundering merchant ships could make them rich overnight. The original players were dissatisfied with this. After all, there were only so many merchant ships traveling between the Void Ocean and the Quilong Ocean. The European server players were plundering their resources by doing this. However, in the few battles with the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association's fleet, the original players did not expect that the European server forces would take the initiative to help. According to a few big guilds of the European server, the internal strife of the players was one thing, but they would unite against the foreign enemies. At this moment, the original players also put aside their prejudices and chose to cooperate with the European server players. While plundering, their main goal was to attack the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association. For this reason, the original players also showed their sincerity and shared many of the maps in the internal group of the strategy section. Since the last expedition of a European server, the players of the two big servers who were usually at odds with each other chose to cooperate again in the face of interests and foreign enemies. With the help of the European server's fleet, the players' morale was high and the sanctions against the merchant guilds became more aggressive. In addition to the Western Continent Merchant Association, many merchant ships that came to the Void Ocean from the outer sea were punished on the spot. In just a few days, the players plundered a total of 89 merchant ships. The huge amount of spiritual materials they obtained made the players go crazy. At the same time, Smoke Dragon, who was on the Black Reef Island, was furious. At this moment, he looked at the intelligence compiled by his subordinates with an ugly expression. It's only been 5 days? 89 merchant ships have been robbed. Are you telling me this is true? Smoke Dragon suppressed his anger and said in a low voice while looking at his subordinate who was collecting the information. President, the news is true. There are already 8 chambers of commerce asking for help. The intelligence officer replied in a low voice with a timid expression. The intelligence says that the player clan lost over 5,700 warships. Is this information accurate? Smoke Dragon asked again with a livid expression. Guild Commander Dragon, King Dragon, Commander Dragon, Dragon in Smoke. Dragon Guild members. Bang! Upon hearing this, Smoke Dragon slammed his palm on the conference table. We've lost more than 5,700 warships. Why hasn't their plundering been stopped? Instead, it's becoming more and more intense. Tell me why. How many warships does the player clan have? Smoke Dragon glared at the intelligence officer and asked, I don't know. After all, the player clan's power is based on the land. I have no useful information about their specific strength. Looking at Smoke Dragon's increasingly cold eyes, the intelligence quickly said, President, I know someone who knows the player clan very well. You can find out everything you want from him. Ooh, the monarch of the Mu-Te Kingdom. Upon hearing this, Smoke Dragon's expression froze. He suddenly remembered that the elder of the Western Continent Merchant Association had told him that the Sea King had a sea war with the player clan. Smoke Dragon took a deep breath and said, Call him here. Tell him that I'm looking for him personally. I'll go now. The intelligence replied immediately. Smoke Dragon pressed his temples and waved his hand, signaling for the intelligence to leave. Now that 8 merchant associations had asked him for help, Smoke Dragon also felt great pressure. Naturally, this pressure did not come from the 8 merchant associations, but from the Underworld Merchant Alliance. If he couldn't handle it properly, the 8 merchant associations would naturally choose to report to the Underworld Merchant Alliance. By then, the Underworld Merchant Alliance's higher-ups would definitely put pressure on him. Although the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association he led was a core merchant association in the Underworld Merchant Alliance, it still couldn't compare to the high-ranking merchant associations with great power and strength. This was because the Underworld Merchant Alliance's higher-ups were all forces in the central sea of the Underworld. To be able to stand in the central sea of the Underworld where there were many powerful clans and gods, Smoke Dragon knew very well how terrifying these higher-ups were. Although the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association he led was called the War Merchant Association, in fact, it was just a force that the higher-ups of the Underworld Merchant Alliance didn't want to do things themselves. If he couldn't do things well, he could be deprived of the authority of the War Merchant Association at any time. This was unacceptable to Smoke Dragon. The reason why the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association could develop so quickly was because of the War Merchant Association's name. They collected high protection fees from sea merchants in the major sea regions. Without this authority, the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association would only be a marine force. Thinking of this, Smoke Dragon's eyes glowed fiercely. He hated the player clan even more. After waiting for half a day, the Sea King finally arrived. Under the guidance of the intelligence personnel, he entered the conference room inside Black Reef Island and saw Smoke Dragon waiting for him. Sit. Smoke Dragon, who was resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes and looked at the Sea King. Hearing this, the Sea King nodded and sat opposite Smoke Dragon. I heard that you know a lot about the player clan? Smoke Dragon asked. Not really, but I've been in contact with them for a long time, the Sea King said. At this time, he had already guessed why Smoke Dragon wanted to see him. Obviously, Smoke Dragon was now experiencing the bitterness he went through back then. Tell me what you know about the player clan. By the way, how strong is the player clan? Smoke Dragon stared at the Sea King and asked again. Hearing this, the Sea King couldn't help but laugh. In terms of strength, they aren't very strong. However, their unique characteristic is that they are fearless and extremely vengeful. Logically speaking, without absolute strength to match, they would have been destroyed a long time ago. However, until now, they are still around and getting stronger. Why is that? Smoke Dragon couldn't help but frown. If I knew the reason, I wouldn't have been defeated. President Smoke Dragon, I can only say that you shouldn't have attacked the player clan impulsively. They have always been vengeful. If the Smoke Dragon Trade Union isn't destroyed, they won't let it go, the Sea King said with a smile. Bam! Hearing this, Smoke Dragon's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He raised his hand and slammed it on the conference table. Suddenly, the entire conference table turned into powder under the violent force and fell down. Destroy my Smoke Dragon Trade Union just by relying on the player clan. At this moment, Smoke Dragon looked at the Sea King with murderous intent. President Smoke Dragon, since you want to know the information, I'm just telling you what I know. Why are you so angry? The Sea King was still smiling. Monarch of Mute Monarch, the player clan can drive you out of the Void Ocean because you are weak. There's only one ending for my Smoke Dragon Trade Union, and that is to destroy the player clan. Smoke Dragon said with a ferocious expression. This sentence was undoubtedly poking at the Sea King's wound. However, the Sea King remained calm and laughed instead. President Smoke Dragon, you are right. The Sea King, was driven out of the Void Ocean because I was too weak. Since you have taken action this time, it can be considered as revenge for me. I thank you in advance. The Sea King stood up as he spoke. President Smoke Dragon, do you have any other information you want to know? The Sea King continued to ask. Smoke Dragon didn't speak. His face was still gloomy. Monarch of Mute Monarch, I'll send you off the island, the intelligence officer said to the Sea King. Upon hearing this, the Sea King nodded. After taking another deep look at Smoke Dragon, he turned around and left with the intelligence officer. After the Sea King left, Smoke Dragon clenched his fists with a livid expression. Under the protection of the Acheron Merchant Guild, he had dominated all the major oceans. Even forces that were several times stronger than him treated him with respect. What the players did this time really made him angry. Thinking of this, he suddenly stood up. This time, he was going to personally lead the army to attack the player clan's base camp and annihilate the player clan. After a while, countless signal birds flew out of the Black Reef Island and conveyed Smoke Dragon's order to the Smoke Dragon's detachments that were traveling in the two major oceans. Soon, the detachments of Smoke Dragon began to return after receiving the order. Smoke Dragon was also ready to lead the attack himself. On the side of the players, the craze of plundering did not subside at all. During this period of time, the strength of the player clan had once again entered a stage of rapid development. The sea merchants might be an inviolable organization in the eyes of other sea forces, but in the eyes of the players, they were just leaks. Now, all the sea merchants that traveled to the Void Ocean knew about the player clan. In the eyes of the sea merchants, this clan was directly linked to the sea plundering forces. Since they dared to challenge the sea merchants and acted so unscrupulously, countless sea forces seemed to have seen the end of the player clan. Among them, there was only one person who had expectations for the player clan. That person was the Sea King. As the person who hated the players the most and understood them the most, he was ready to watch a good show. What the players did not expect was that when the Smoke Dragon clan finished gathering their forces and was ready to set off for the Void Ocean, someone came to the Lioli coast first. This person was none other than the lord of the Mutesi nation, Sha Shui. He brought a message that the Smoke Dragon clan's fleet was coming and asked the players to be prepared. Obviously, Sha Shui came under the Sea King's order. Although the players were surprised, they quickly began to discuss countermeasures on the forum. The players had expected this battle, but they were not afraid of it. Even if they attacked the Lioli coast and took it down, it would not hurt the player clan at all unless the Smoke Dragon Merchant Guild stationed at the Lioli coast forever. However, the players were naturally unwilling to retreat hastily for the upcoming battle. They began to discuss countermeasures on how to make the Smoke Dragon Merchant Guild pay a heavy price in this battle. Chapter 501. After receiving the news that the Smoke Dragon Trade Association was coming, the players started to get busy and prepare for the war. The current player forces were no longer as weak as before, where they could only rely on resurrection to fight to their deaths. With the opening of various life professions, many of the players' shortcomings were made up. With Lin Tai as the leader, the forging team started to work overnight to make the marine war equipment exchange from the pirate mall. At the same time, Hu-He and Nye Fong arrived at the Lioli coast from the European server. As two extremely destructive natural disasters, their appearance also raised the spirits of the players, especially the bomber, who brought along a killer weapon this time. Nye Fong initially resisted the idea of making explosives, but after interacting with Hu-He, he gradually accepted it and became optimistic. Just like what Hu-He said, even if you had a terrifying ability like a natural disaster, as long as you used it properly, you would still be respected by others. This should be your strength and pride, not your shadow. Take Hu-He, for example. Although the original server's early development period brought about a crushing difficulty for the players, they were not afraid of him. He became an existence that everyone hated. However, now that he came to the European server avoided several server annihilation crises with his help. He also won the respect of a large number of European server players. This time, after blowing up the demonic formation, Nye Fong also received the same treatment. During this period, he also received countless invitations from major guilds and was respected. He also understood what Hu-He was trying to say. However, just like Hu-He, he chose to refuse because he stayed in the European server to help Hu-He defeat Yuan-Shu. After that, he planned to follow Hu-He back to the original server. After all, his roots were here, and the misunderstanding about blowing up the Mansion of the Dead had been resolved. He did not need to worry about anything at all. The killer weapon he brought this time was a newly developed new type of elixir, explosive. Thunder Elixir, Level 3 Elixir. Item details, made from the combination of thunder grass, thunder fruit, lifeless water, and other spiritual materials. Dark energy was integrated during the refining process, causing the internal energy to be extremely unstable. Under external force, it will easily explode and cause large-scale lightning damage. Quality, 76 Apothecary. Nye Fong. Thunder Elixir was a new type of explosive made by Nye Fong using spiritual materials from the European server. It was powerful, but most importantly, it had a great control ability. As long as the Thunder Pill exploded, not only would the enemies within its range receive damage, but they would also be affected by status effects such as numbness. This kind of pill was undoubtedly very effective in large-scale battles. It immediately became a hot item in the auction house. At the same time, Nye Fong also began to develop a new type of water bomb for naval battles. They hoped to obtain an underwater bomb similar to a mine to ambush the fleet of the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce. For this reason, he specifically sought out the rock boulder and consulted him. As a master alchemist, the rock boulder immediately provided a few spirit materials for reference. After that, Niefeng devoted himself to research and development. Of course, Niefeng would not concoct pills in the Mansion of the Dead. After all, it would be too scary for the original players. He was afraid that his home would be gone again before the Smoke Dragon fleet arrived. As for the Great Devil King he now had 28 zombie spirits that were half a step into the Ghost King realm. His overall strength was also the highest among the players. Their arrival filled the players of a European server and the original server with confidence for the upcoming war. In order to deal with the arrival of the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce, even the major guilds of the European server came to the Lioli coast during this period. The safe zone on the sea was full of three-masted sailboats and Spectre battleships from the European server. During this period, the gluttony that could provide buffs made by the demonic chef life profession players had also become a necessary strategic reserve during this period. In these few days, the players spent a lot of soul coins and converted them into combat power. On Lu Wu's side, he had also harvested a large amount of soul coins as tax and made a lot of money. Pressure was also a motivation for the players, and it was also the key reason why they spent the soul coins that they had previously stored. During this period, while the players were strengthening themselves, they were also enriching Lu Wu. After all, although soul coins were the tangible currency of soul power, to the players, they were just currency because they did not have the authority to convert soul coins into experience or soul power. The soul coins that the players stored were of no value to Lu Wu. It was best to let the players spend their soul coins and convert them into their own combat power. After all, his goal was to build the calamity army of the players, and the strength of the players was the key to the formation of this army. As time passed, the third day arrived. As far as the eye could see, the Lioli coast was full of steel battleships. Among them, the most eye-catching was the super battleship that the European server players had built with all their efforts. It was as large as an aircraft carrier, and its pitch-black hull shone with a dark luster under the sun. It was like a giant, unsheathed sword lying horizontally on the sea, showing off its sharpness. However, if the strength of the two seas were compared, the strength of the original server was still well-deserved to be number one. This was not only reflected in the number of battleships, but also in the overall combat power. As the second development direction of the original server players, the development of the sea was also highly valued. At this moment, the main battleships of the original server docked at the Lioli coast were generally Spectre battleships that were above level 7, and there were more than 1,000 battleships that were above level 10. These battleships were also the painstaking efforts of the original server players. They carried bricks day and night and spent a lot of energy to fatten these battleships. Just as the players were preparing for war, the fleet of the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association sailed into the Void Ocean. This time, the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association personally led the fleet. There were more than 500 battleships led by the fleet, and a total of more than 12,000 people. The strength of this fleet was undoubtedly powerful. It could be said that there was no force in the Void Ocean and the Kuelong Ocean that could compete with it at this stage. This was not to say that the Void Ocean and the Kuelong Ocean were weak. They were the lowest sea in the entire Underworld Ocean. Just like the law of survival in this world, no force could exist for a long time, and no force could be strong forever. In the past, there were extremely powerful forces in the Void Ocean and the Kuelong Ocean, and there were even super forces that settled in the Central Ocean of the Underworld. However, in the course of history, many super forces either left or were destroyed. At this stage, there were indeed no forces in the Void Ocean and the Kuelong Ocean that could expand outward or even settle in the Central Ocean of the Underworld. There was not even a huge sea force like the Nether Sea Nation that was destroyed that controlled the three major oceans. In fact, this was an inevitable process of the development of the sea. Every time a super force left, a new battle for hegemony in the sea would begin. They would become the overlord of the sea and monopolize all the resources. Then, they would rely on these resources to develop rapidly and advance in the direction of a superforce in the sea. The result would be either destruction or success. After becoming a super force in the sea, most of them would choose to head to the central ocean of the underworld, which was the strongest, and compete with the demigods and gods for the greatest benefits in the sea. This was a cycle. In this new cycle, the force with the most potential was the one controlled by the Sea King. This was because he managed to rule the void ocean and gather all the resources. If the players did not appear, the Sea King's force that obtained all the resources in the void ocean would slowly develop and grow stronger as time passed. Perhaps in the future, they would have the opportunity to rush out of the void ocean and compete with other forces in the sea. As long as they ruled the sea for a long time and obtained enough resources, the Sea King had the potential to become a super force in the sea. However, not long after he ruled the void ocean, he met the players and his future was mercilessly cut off. Although he relied on his own efforts to establish the Mu-Te-Si nation and obtain the strength of a ghost emperor. However, in reality, he did not have the power to rule the void ocean, nor did he have the huge amount of resources to use. Compared to the speed of development, there was still a huge gap. Therefore, at this stage, it was normal that no force in the two major oceans could compete with the foreign smoke dragon trade union. This was because after the destruction of the previous superforce, the Nethersea nation, these two oceans entered a new cycle of development and hegemony. The smoke dragon trade union that came at this time undoubtedly had a sense of superiority. After all, there were no forces that were stronger than him in the two major oceans. Therefore, to the smoke dragon, his words were the rules and no force could disobey them. Under normal circumstances, the forces in the Void Ocean and the Kowloon Ocean would choose to tolerate and cooperate with all the decisions made by the Smoke Dragon. However, it was different this time because there was a very unique force in the Void Ocean. It was the player clan that the Sea King called a rogue force. According to the law of survival in the sea, the weak must obey the strong, or else they would be annihilated. However, this rule obviously did not exist for the players. From the moment they started playing the game, the players were becoming more and more stubborn. According to the players, you can kill me, but it's impossible for you to beat me into submission. Disobeying the rules, willful, unscrupulous, and so on, the players were labeled with all kinds of labels that violated the law of survival in this world. This was also the reason why the players were unique. Because he knew the player clan too well, the Sea King was very curious and expectant. He wanted to know if this ridiculously stubborn clan could continue to advance like this. The arrival of the Smoke Dragon, this time, was a new round of research on this player force. It was also a chance for the Sea King to understand this force in more detail. At this moment, the huge Smoke Dragon fleet slowly advanced into the Void Ocean. In the sky above this fleet, dark clouds rolled, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. The dark clouds that followed the fleet was actually the Smoke Dragon fleet's way of fighting the enemy. Every Smoke Dragon warship was equipped with a thundercloud core that was connected to each other. The fleet was arranged in the thunderstorm formation, and the entire fleet was a huge formation. This was a special defense formation. When the formation was deployed, all enemies that approached the Smoke Dragon fleet would be bombarded by the thunderstorm formation. After entering the Void Ocean, the Smoke Dragon immediately ordered the fleet to change direction and head toward the Lioli coast. The players' unscrupulous plundering of merchant ships had angered the Smoke Dragon fleet to the extreme, and he was ready to annihilate the player clan. Therefore, this time, he brought all the combat power of the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association. From his point of view, the weak should show the attitude that the weak should have. If they still didn't know what was good for them when they were weak, then they would only be annihilated. Even if the player clan didn't encounter him, they would be annihilated sooner or later. However, since the player clan had provoked him, the Smoke Dragon decided to personally send the player clan into the abyss. Chapter 502. As the Smoke Dragon fleet approached the Lioli coast, the players who went to investigate finally sent back a warning message. At this moment, the voices of the guild leaders rang out in the chat channels of the major guilds, calling for their members to board the ships and prepare for battle. The sails of the battleships were raised, and black flags were also raised at this moment. Although their chances of winning this battle were slim, They could not afford to lose momentum. For this battle, after a discussion between the professional players from the European server and the local server, Yin Xiaoqi would be the one to lead the battle. Players from both the European server and the original server admired Yin Xiaoqi's abilities. Back then, she came up with the idea to help the European server resolve 2 crises and win over the evil king, allowing him to become an NPC of the European server. In the original server, Yin Xiaoqi's super elite guild, Battle, was equally famous. The players from both the European server and the original server had no objections to Yin Xiaoqi's decision to lead the battle. At this time, Yin Xiaoqi's cold voice rang out in the live chat channel. Everyone, just as I said before, the goal of this battle is to create momentum. Ships can be destroyed, people can be killed, but momentum must not be lost. Do you still remember the battles we fought against the enemy? What can make the enemy tremble in fear is not necessarily absolute strength. It can also be an indomitable spirit and a spirit that is unafraid of death. Depart. Along with the order, the roar of machinery and spiritual energy inside the battleships sounded. At this moment, the battleships left the Lioli coast and advanced toward the Void Ocean. There was no fear in the players' hearts for this battle, only excitement and anticipation. They had never experienced a naval battle of this scale. Even during the battle with the Sea King, their final battle was on land and not in the sea. In the Void Ocean, the Smoke Dragon Trade Association had arrived at the center of the Void Ocean after half a day's journey. All the forces along the way made way for them. It could be said that they were coming at them aggressively. As they got closer and closer to the Lioli coast, the Smoke Dragon couldn't wait to kill. As a war merchant group, they had not used force for a long time. From Smoke Dragon's point of view, annihilating the player clan this time was also to prove to Wang Su and all the forces in the Kowloon Ocean how powerful the Smoke Dragon Trade Association was. He wanted to let all the forces understand the consequences of provoking them. As they continued to sail, the Smoke Dragon suddenly discovered that countless black dots had appeared on the surface of the sea. An unimaginably huge fleet was heading towards them. At this moment, the soldier standing on the watchtower bellowed to the people below, "President, there's a huge fleet coming from the south. Estimate the specific number." Hearing this, the Smoke Dragon immediately raised its head and replied. After a moment of silence, the watchman's voice was heard again. This time, his voice was clearly trembling. "President, it's impossible to estimate. At the very least, 30,000. No, 50,000 warships. What?" At this moment, the Smoke Dragon almost thought he heard it wrong. 50,000. Smoke Dragon was dumbfounded. He shouted again. "Can you see clearly which faction it is?" After another moment of silence, the watchman's reply came from above. Guildmaster, it looks like the player clan's fleet. These warships look very similar." Hearing this, the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce couldn't help but widen its eyes. The Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce was a war chamber of commerce, but it only had 10,000 members and 528 battleships. The other side had more than 50,000. Beat your mother. At this moment, the Smoke Dragon wanted to tear the Sea King, who had provided the information, into pieces. Didn't they say that the player clan wasn't strong and that they were just arrogant? How could 50,000 battleships not be arrogant? If it were him, he might even dare to venture into the central sea of the underworld. At this thought, the Smoke Dragon instantly panicked. He wanted to annihilate the player clan, but he never thought that the player clan's forces were so terrifying. It could be said that it was completely beyond his imagination. If he really started a war, he would not be annihilating the player clan, but courting death. Thinking of this, he was about to open his mouth to return when the intelligence officer, standing on the side, said, "President, don't worry. According to the information from the major fleets, the player clan's warships are not real Spectre warships, but fake warships built in the shape of Spectre warships. Although they have the shape of Spectre warships, in reality, they can't compare to the performance of Spectre warships at all. They are far inferior in all aspects. They are completely paper tigers." Really? The information is reliable. Looking up at the dense black dots on the distant sea, the smoke dragon asked in disbelief. Yes, in terms of hardness, these warships may not even be as strong as the finished Spectre warships, let alone Spectre warships. We don't need to be afraid at all, the intelligence officer said again. After knowing the whole story, the smoke dragon was instantly annoyed by his previous timidity. He immediately said, "If that's the case, let's continue forward. It turns out to be a paper tiger. I thought there were more than 50,000 Spectre warships." In fact, what the smoke dragon and the intelligence officer did not know was that the warships of the players were all real Spectre warships. However, the tribute that the Sea King demanded from Cha-Na was placed on the players because of Cha-Na's death. The development of the sea was imminent, but the players did not have enough resources to build Spectre warships and Spectre warships. Therefore, the Spectre warships that Bei Li designed were growth-type Spectre warships. Although they had the appearance of Spectre warships at first, they needed to consume a large number of spiritual materials to grow slowly. In terms of grade, the Spectre warships in the hands of the players were of a higher grade than the warships in the Smoke Dragon's hands, and the growth potential was even higher. Therefore, during the several battles in the sea, the members of the Smoke Dragon fleet who discovered the strangeness of the Spectre warships in the hands of the players were all paper tigers. They were just special warships built with the same appearance to scare people. The distance between the two sides was getting closer and closer as they sailed. The Smoke Dragon said with a ferocious expression, "Accelerate and ram them." As soon as he gave the order, the signalman on the high platform at the bow waved the signal flag in his hand and gave the orders of accelerate and ram. Instantly, the speed of the Smoke Dragon fleet increased, and the roar of the energy running inside the hull was heard. As time passed, 3 nautical miles, 2 nautical miles, 1 nautical mile, the storm above the Smoke Dragon fleet was raging, and thunder and lightning kept striking the surface of the sea. It was a menacing sight. However, the players were never weak in terms of momentum. When Yin Xiaoqi shouted the words to release the boat's spirit, it was as if an ancient seal had been broken at that moment, and the shadows of tens of thousands of beasts suddenly appeared, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. At that moment, the Smoke Dragon's expression changed again. Is this really not a Spectre warship? This it's not. The intelligence officer was shocked to see this, but he still gritted his teeth and said. At that moment, they were less than 1 nautical mile away. With the inertia of moving forward, it was too late to turn around. After glaring at the intelligence officer beside him, the Smoke Dragon took out a golden scroll from his pocket and strode to the bow of the ship. He opened the scroll, and countless golden characters appeared. "See God's pardon, see God's howl." As soon as he said that, a string of characters jumped out of the scroll and slowly enlarged in front of the warships. At that moment, the wind suddenly rose. The originally clear sky was now howling, and huge waves were stirred up on the surface of the sea. The players' fleet that was originally moving with the wind was suddenly going against it. What was even more unbelievable to the players was that in the howling hurricane, water pillars gathered on the surface of the sea and slowly formed water elemental giants. See God's pardon, storm order. The Smoke Dragon's voice became extremely loud, as if it had merged with heaven and earth, echoing in the sea. In an instant, the dark clouds became lower, and the wind became more violent. A waterspout slowly took shape on the surface of the sea and quickly expanded toward the players' army. Before the players' fleet collided with the Smoke Dragon fleet, danger had arrived. At that moment, Yin Xiaoqi hurriedly shouted in the live chat channel, "All units, activate the protective shield and spread out." After receiving the order, the players' fleet quickly spread out in 2 directions. With the help of the live chat channel, the order was transmitted extremely quickly. As the waterspout approached, the players' fleet was no longer as densely packed as before. At this moment, the rapidly spinning waterspout collided with the front row of the fleet. The water droplets that were thrown out by the waterspout were as sharp as bullets, creating dense holes in the front row of warships. Try to attack the waterspout and see if you could destroy it, Yin Xiaoqi immediately said. After receiving the order, countless ship spirits pounced toward the waterspout and began to tear and bite at it. The waterspout seemed to be enraged and once again swept up a large amount of seawater, which turned into water swords and flung in all directions. A large number of ship spirits were torn apart by this attack, but the waterspout was not affected at all. Seeing this, Yin Xiaoqi's expression darkened, and she immediately ordered the players' fleet to expand the distance between them. Standing beside Yin Xiaoqi, the great empress crossed her arms in front of her chest and said calmly, "This won't do. This waterspout is actually invisible. The seawater is only the elemental power that it has gathered. If we want to destroy it, we still have to use wind power. Only then can we destroy its rotating core." Yin Xiaoqi immediately nodded. "Attention! In the fleet, all 5 elemental warlocks, activate your wind elemental state and begin to gather power. Listen to my command." As soon as he finished speaking, the warlocks on the warships immediately changed their forms and began to gather wind power. One after another, the players' warships were sunk by the waterspout. Seeing this scene from afar, the smoke dragon couldn't help but laugh. As expected of a paper tiger, can't even withstand a single blow. At this moment, Yin Xiaoqi shouted in the live chat channel, "Release." Suddenly, a green hurricane formed in front of the players' warships and swept toward the waterspout. Instantly, the rotation inside the waterspout was disrupted and began to distort. The rotation speed was sometimes faster and sometimes slower. The sea level sometimes sank into a deep chasm, and sometimes it gathered into a mountain. Boom! With a loud noise, the waterspout exploded. Countless water droplets rose and fell like a goddess scattering flowers. Seeing that the waterspout was broken, the smoke dragon couldn't help but be surprised. At this moment, the 2 fleets were less than 100 meters apart. At this moment, Yin Xiaoqi shouted the order to attack. The players' battle cries rang out. One after another, the ship spirits left the hull and pounced toward the smoke dragon fleet like hungry wolves. Instantly, the smoke dragon fleet's thunderstorm formation was also activated. Countless bolts of lightning as thick as bowls struck down, destroying the ship spirits one after another. At this moment, the 2 fleets at the front also collided. At this moment, the smoke dragon fleet was like a hot soldering iron that was inserted into the sand. It crashed into the other ships one after another, and its speed didn't decrease at all. However, the players weren't worried at all. If 1 wasn't enough, then they would use 2. If 2 weren't enough, then they would use 80,000 ships. Countless player warships chose to collide with the smoke dragon fleet, trying to stop the advance of the smoke dragon fleet. At this moment, the surrounding water giants formed by seawater also launched an attack on the player fleet. The Battle of the Sea had begun. Chapter 503. It was a battle between 80,000 player battleships and 528 smoke dragon battleships. However, the players were already at an absolute disadvantage at the beginning of the battle. When the smoke dragon battleships charged into the players' fleet, the thunderstorm clouds in the sky bombarded all the approaching player fleets. Amidst the flashes of lightning and thunder, the player battleships were destroyed one after another, sending wood chips flying. The massive water giants in the surroundings also raised their fists and pounced on the player battleships, instantly destroying another dozen battleships. Seeing this, the smoke dragon couldn't help but laugh. He spread out the golden scroll in his hand again and said in a deep voice as the golden characters pulsated, "Poseidon's pardon, Arctic order." As soon as the smoke dragon's voice fell, snow began to fall from the sky, and a thin layer of ice appeared on the surface of the sea and spread rapidly, slowing down the player's fleet. "He has the Poseidon's pardon. We must destroy the main ship first, or else the external interference won't stop," the Empress, who was standing beside Yin Xiaoqi, said. Upon hearing this, Yin Xiaoqi said decisively in the live chat channel, "All major guilds, focus your firepower on the smoke dragon battleship." As the order was relayed, the players who were attacking separately began to focus their firepower on the smoke dragon battleship. Poseidon's pardon, water spirit shield. The smoke dragon's loud voice resounded in the sky. Suddenly, several water pillars rose from the sea, forming a circular barrier that enveloped the smoke dragon battleship, blocking the players' attacks. At this moment, Yin Xiaoqi couldn't help but frown. The smoke dragon's various abilities were really troublesome, and it could be said that the players couldn't make full use of their advantage in numbers. Looking at the smoke dragon battleship that was still advancing rapidly, Yin Xiaoqi suddenly had an idea. She immediately said, "All elemental warlocks, transform into water and strengthen the ice layer on the sea." Although the mage players were puzzled, they didn't hesitate and decisively transformed into their forms, throwing ice skills into the sea, and began to strengthen the ice layer that was already frozen. With the support of various ice skills, the ice layer kept thickening, and the smoke dragon battleship that was originally breaking through the ice slowed down. Seeing this, Yin Xiaoqi's lips curled up. Previously, when the smoke dragon froze the sea, it didn't thicken the ice layer, and Yin Xiaoqi was puzzled as to why. Now she understood. Obviously, Smoke Dragon's battleships were far stronger than the players' battleships, so his freezing point was just enough to restrict the players' battleships. However, against their battleships, the thickness of the ice could be easily broken, and they could move forward unimpeded. At this moment, Yin Xiaoqi chose to continue thickening the ice layer. Although this increased the resistance of the players' battleships, it also affected the speed of the Smoke Dragon battleship. Seeing this, Yanlong's expression froze. Now that the speed of their battleships had decreased, it was extremely disadvantageous to them. Right now, his strategy was to lead his fleet into the midst of the players' fleet and use their speed to ram their way through, disrupting the entire formation of the players' fleet. Therefore, speed was very important. Thinking up to this point, he raised Sea God's Pardon and immediately deactivated the freezing ability. The fleet sped up again and continued forward. Along the way, metal fragments and wood splinters flew everywhere. In terms of warship strength, the players' warships were at an absolute disadvantage. At that moment, Yin Xiaoqi's voice was heard in the live chat channel. All necromancers in the European server, activate the long-distance summoning as soon as you reach the casting range. The target is the interior of the Smoke Dragon warship. As Yin Xiaoqi's voice trailed off, many black summoning formations appeared on the decks of the Smoke Dragon warships. One by one, skeletal warriors crawled out of them and pounced on the members of the Smoke Dragon warships. Although these skeletal warriors did not have high combat power, they could still play a role in harassment. At the same time, on the European server's Zero Guild warship, the core group of wizards cast their spells at the same time. Suddenly, a huge black formation appeared on the main warship where Yanlong was. An enormous pitch-black skeletal dragon of the undead slowly emerged from the formation. Seeing this, Yanlong stretched out his hand and waved. The space began to distort, tearing apart the formation and crushing the undead dragon on the spot. However, what he did not expect was that the moment the skeletal dragon exploded, a large amount of black fog spread and covered the entire ship in a short time. Sizzling sounds of corrosion could be heard as it began to corrode the defense shield of the main warship. I've checked the analysis. The original hardness of these Smoke Dragon warships is level 14, but I can't see the hardness of the warships after they've been reinforced with the rain shield. I need the specific value. Yin Xiaoqi's voice was heard in the live chat channel. As her voice trailed off, a figure leaped up from the main warship of the European server and turned into a black stream of light, crashing violently. Wrath of the Death Knights. Boom! The ice layer shook, but the blow did not break through the ice layer. As the figure fell, a black rope appeared on the main warship of the European server. It wrapped around his body and pulled him back to the warship. Reinhardt, don't be impulsive. With your individual strength, you can't measure the specific hardness of the Smoke Dragon warship, Li Xing said with a serious expression. When Reinhardt heard that, he nodded with a gloomy expression. After a test, just now, he finally knew how strong the defense shield of the main warship where Yanlong was. It was unrealistic for a single person to break the shield. In the distance, the myth warship. After hearing In Xiaoqi's words, Gu Yu's expression turned solemn. Right in front of them, a smoke dragon warship was heading toward them. Although the level of their myth warship was already very high, he did not have any confidence of winning in a head-on collision with a smoke dragon warship that was more than a level higher in quality. However, he did not choose to avoid it because he wanted to test the specific hardness of the smoke dragon warship. The way to measure it was to collide with it head-on. Domination body. As his voice fell, a layer of golden light shield suddenly appeared on the surface of the myth warship. The distance between the two sides was very close. In the blink of an eye, the dragon horns collided with each other. Boom! In an instant, the shields of the two warships shattered. This time, the scene of the smoke dragon warship crushing the warships of the players did not reappear. In the collision, the smoke dragon warship slowly moved backward. Cracks appeared on the dragon horns, and they gradually fell off. As for the myth warship, the entire bow of the ship was dented. A large number of wood shavings and metal fragments flew everywhere. This collision almost destroyed half of the myth warship. A large number of players on the ship were shaken off and fell into the water. The hull of the ship slowly tilted backward and sank into the water bit by bit. At this moment, Gu Yu activated the demonic god form and floated into the air. Beside him, the dog followed closely. Seeing this scene, Gu Yu's face was filled with joy. This proved that although the smoke dragon warship was strong, the difference in strength was still acceptable and it would still be damaged. Although the myth warships sank, they did not suffer any losses. After all these materials would be recycled. They just had to wait for the cooldown to be over before they could be summoned again. However, the damage of the smoke dragon warship was real battle damage. Not only did they not suffer any losses from this collision, but they also made a profit. Most importantly, he knew the hardness value of the smoke dragon warship. Thinking of this, Gu Yu immediately spoke in the main live chat channel. Attention, the strength of the smoke dragon warship is unknown. The hardness of the rest of the smoke dragon warships with shields is around level 15. Warships that are level 13 and above can collide with them. In this battle, try to damage their warships as much as possible and create an advantage for the next battle. Hearing this, Lu Chai, Yi Shui, and the others were pleasantly surprised. This was because the warships that they were on were all above level 13. In other words, if they collided with them, they could cause damage to the smoke dragon warship. At this moment, the smoke dragon warship was like a ferocious tiger pouncing on a flock of sheep. They came aggressively and crashed all the way. A large number of damaged hull parts floated behind the warship. However, the players were not a flock of sheep. They were a pack of wolves waiting for an opportunity to move. Even though they were at an absolute disadvantage in this battle, the players did not give up. After countless players fell into the water, they decisively summoned their private Spectre ships and once again crashed into the Smoke Dragon warship. Even the Smoke Dragon warship could not believe the way the players were fighting. To him, this kind of naval battle was simply too crazy. It was completely draining the foundation of a force. In the Smoke Dragon warship's opinion, even if these warships were not real Spectre ships, it would still take a lot of time to build them. Such a heartless collision was completely draining the foundation of the players' force. Were they prepared to perish together? Moreover, what made him feel distressed was that the more than 500 Smoke Dragon warships that he led were more or less damaged under such a crazy attack, except for the main warship that he was on. After all, repairing these warships would cost a lot of spiritual materials. After this battle, he would have to spend a lot of money. The player's mentality was completely different from the Smoke Dragon warships. Battle damage? No way. Warships were essentially the same as the players. They were both things that could repair themselves. Therefore, the players did not feel distressed at all. They could fight however they wanted. Losses did not matter. Momentum was the focus of this battle. Therefore, while the Smoke Dragon warship was stunned, the player's collision became even more crazy. There was no need for him to command the warships to take the initiative to crash. The players' warships would swarm over. As for the water giants that the Smoke Dragon warship summoned, the players did not care at all. They let the water giants do whatever they wanted. Their only target was the smoke dragon warships. The smoke dragon warship had never seen such a fighting style. Under such attacks, the smoke dragon warship voluntarily slowed down, turned around, and increased the distance. In the end, the smoke dragon warship gave up on fighting head-on. If this was a normal naval battle, the enemy's formation would definitely be in chaos under such attacks. The warships would choose to avoid the collision to reduce their losses. However, the player's thought process was completely different from the smoke dragon warships. Instead, they liked this kind of fighting style. If they knew that they could cause damage to the enemy, everything would be worth it. Under such crazy collisions, even the smoke dragon warship could not take it anymore. However, there was no way that the players would let him go. They continued to attack relentlessly and closely. The smoke dragon warship could only use the Neptune's pardon to continuously summon the power of the ocean to snipe the players. Now, the smoke dragon warship only had one idea. It changed from close-range combat to long-range combat. With the Neptune's pardon, it would slowly devour the player's fleet. Meanwhile, Xiaoqi had already seen through the smoke dragon warship's plan. The smoke dragon warship that had crashed into the player's fleet was now surrounded by 5 circles. It was easy to get in, but it was not so easy to get out. Seeing this scene, far in the sky, a figure surrounded by lightning could not help but laugh out loud in the dark clouds. Although this figure was covered in lightning, a black halo floated on his forehead. It was spinning rapidly and blocked the lightning around him, preventing him from being killed. It was a familiar smell and familiar tactics. The Neptunes seemed to have become more familiar with the Neptune's pardon. However, this was a player clan that he knew. Looking down, the Sea King was in a very good mood. Chapter 504. At this moment, the smoke dragon fleet was completely enraged. A loud voice reverberated in the sea. The golden runes on the sea god's pardon floated into the air, and the sea seemed to be boiling. From time to time, huge waves rose and slammed the players' warships into the water. In the sky, the surging dark clouds kept sending down lightning punishments. The players' warships couldn't withstand these attacks, and many of the players' warships were sunk by the violent power of nature. At this moment, Xiaoqi frowned. Although the players had caused damage to the smoke dragon fleet, they hadn't sunk a single warship yet. This wasn't what she wanted to see. It's useless. The sea god's pardon is an advanced legendary treasure. If we can't destroy it, the external interference won't stop. However, we can't even break the defense of the smoke dragon fleet's main warship. We've lost this battle. When Xiaoqi heard this, she rolled her eyes in exasperation. Sister Yu, do you have any good suggestions? Even if we lose, we should at least sink a few warships, right? Otherwise, I won't be willing to lose just like that. Give up on attacking the main warship and focus on attacking the other smoke dragon warships. The defenses of those warships aren't as strong as the main warship. Xiaoqi nodded. Then, she looked up at the surging dark clouds above her head and asked again, is there a way to disperse these thunderstorm clouds? This thunderstorm cloud is formed by the formation of the smoke dragon battleships below. Every time a smoke dragon battleship sinks, the power of the thunderstorm cloud will weaken by a bit. As long as 1/3 of the smoke dragon battleship is destroyed, the thunderstorm cloud will dissipate by itself. Upon hearing this, Xiaoqi nodded helplessly. Right now, they couldn't even sink one warship, let alone 1/3 of it. It was completely unrealistic. At this thought, Xiaoqi spoke in a live chat channel. Attention, everyone. Give up on attacking the smoke dragon warships and attack the other warships instead. Following Xiaoqi's command, the players changed their attack method again. Although the smoke dragon warships suffered some damage, the damage was still too light in the players' eyes. It was as though the players had spent tens of thousands of gold coins only to buy eggs. Although the tens of thousands of gold coins would return to the players, they felt that it wasn't worth it. At this moment, in the center of the battlefield, the demonic god club's second-year middle schoolers were staring at a smoke dragon battleship that was approaching them from afar. Their expressions were ugly. Boss, kill it. Fatty looked at Sheng and Egamon. Our warship's hardness is only level 10. The damage caused by the collision is negligible. And Shung could not help but sigh. Then what should we do? Why don't we try to worship the demonic god and summon him out? Fatty pointed at the demonic god statue behind him. When Shung heard this, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. When he turned his head to look, he was stunned to find that a few youths in the guild were already worshipping him devoutly. At this moment, Shung could not help but cover his face. He recalled that there was a post on the forum saying that the demonic god society was made up of retarded youths. At that time, he was not convinced, but now he suddenly believed it. The smoke dragon worship was getting closer and closer to them. At this moment, Shung gritted his teeth. F*CKU. When they collide, we'll jump into the sea and summon our private specter ship to continue fighting. When Fatty heard this, he nodded solemnly. Those over there, stop worshipping. Get ready to jump into the sea. Shung turned his head to look at the guild members who were still worshipping the demonic god and roared. At Shung's roar, the guild members stood up resentfully. At this moment, the smoke dragon worship arrived. Jump! Immediately, the members of the demonic god society jumped into the water one after another. The demonic god worship was smashed into pieces the moment it collided with the smoke dragon worship. Seeing that the demonic god worship was gone just like that, while the smoke dragon worship was unscathed, Fatty, who had fallen into the water, kicked the hull of the smoke dragon worship angrily. Suddenly, a defensive shield appeared, and he was sent flying more than 10 meters away. At this moment, Fatty's temper flared up. He took out a bunch of items from his channel and threw them at the smoke dragon worship. Although he knew that they could not break through the defense, he still wanted to throw them. Among the one-time items, there were items such as the poison mist potion and flame potion that he had bought from the shop. There were also some consumables that he had bought from the auction house. One of them was the thunder pill refined by the bomber. The moment these items collided with the smoke dragon warship, flames and electric arcs exploded. The defensive shield of the warship trembled slightly, but it did not break through. Fatty let out a dispirited sigh when he saw this scene. Right at this moment, an unexpected scene occurred. The thunderclouds above the warship suddenly surged. Then, a bolt of lightning as thick as a bowl struck the shield of the warship. Kacha! The warship's shield shattered, and a lightning bolt penetrated it, creating a deep hole in the front deck of the warship. The rampaging electric arcs also caused significant damage to the members of the warship. Seeing this, Fatty was dumbfounded. What's going on? He quickly opened the combat interface to check the details. Causing fire damage to the target warship. Causing poison mist corrosion damage to the target warship. Causing lightning damage to the target warship. The effect of the thunder pill will trigger the heavenly thunder, causing secondary damage to the target warship. After knowing the reason, Fatty's eyes widened. Damn, Fatty, how did you do it? At this moment, Shung's roar sounded in the live chat channel. Thunder pill. Quickly use the thunder pill. What do you mean? It's the thunder pill refined by the bomber. Didn't we each buy one last time? Quickly throw it at this smoke dragon warship, or it will sail away. Fatty said quickly. Hearing this, Shung was puzzled, but he still decisively took out a thunder pill from the channel, charged it, and threw it at the warship. Pa! The thunder pill shattered. As the electric arcs lingered, the dark clouds above once again surged toward the smoke dragon warship. Then, a thunderbolt gathered and smashed down. This thunderbolt was even more violent than before, and the warship, which was already overwhelmed, immediately fell apart. Game notification. Target smoke dragon warship number 428 has been sunk. 247 targets have been killed. 46 have been seriously injured. Death statistics complete. As the game notification sounded, a large amount of blue and golden mist emerged from the sunken part of the warship and poured into the bodies of Shung and his teammates. In a flash of golden light, they leveled up collectively. At this moment, Shung, Fatty, and the others were dumbfounded. They were aware of the strength of these warships. Their level 10 warships could not even break through the defense shield, let alone cause damage to them. However, at this moment, just 2 thunder pills had sunk a warship. At this moment, there was only one thought in their minds. The Bomberman was really awesome. However, what they did not know was that this time, it was not the Bomberman's Thunder Pill that was effective. Instead, the Thunder Pill had the effect of attracting thunder, and the formation of the smoke dragon warship happened to be the thunderstorm formation. It could be said that it perfectly matched the thunder-attracting effect of the Thunder Pill. After knowing that the Thunder Pill could attract thunder, and Shung hurriedly shouted in the regional live chat channel, "The Thunder Pill made by the Bomberman can sink the smoke dragon warship. Who can send this news to the main voice chat? I don't have the authority to speak in the main voice chat." This news immediately attracted the attention of many players, and soon, the news was passed to Luchai. Luchai immediately spoke in the main voice chat channel and conveyed the news that the Thunder Pill could break through the defense of the Smoke Dragon warship to all players. This news was obviously beyond the players' expectations. Although the players knew that the Thunder Pill made by the Bomberman was very powerful, the defense of the Smoke Dragon warship was at least level 15. Therefore, no players tried to break the defense of the Smoke Dragon warship with the Thunder Pill. However, after knowing this news, the players suddenly became excited. Many players who bought the Thunder Pill took out the Thunder Pill from the channel. One by one, the Thunder Pill was thrown toward the Smoke Dragon warship. At this moment, the thunderstorm clouds in the sky were like the angry thunder god. Lightning flashed, and lightning pillars that were as thick as the mouth of a bowl struck down. It turned out that the Thunder Pill could indeed break through the defense of the Smoke Dragon warship. The defense shields of the Smoke Dragon warships were shattered one by one, and some warships were even sunk by the lightning pillars. At this moment, the players cheered in the live chat channel. Sinking these Smoke Dragon warships not only gave them soul coins and EXP, but most importantly, the joy of victory. The players were extremely frustrated when they were suppressed. Now, it was finally time for them to fight back. Under the interference of the Thunder Pill, the thunderstorm clouds seemed to be unable to distinguish between friend and foe. While they struck the players' warships, they also struck the Smoke Dragon warships. By the time the Smoke Dragon warships realized this, more than 30 warships had been destroyed. At this moment, the Smoke Dragon warships were furious. These warships were his treasures and also the capital of the Acheron Trade Union. How could he not be distressed when they were destroyed like this? President, the player clan seems to have something that interferes with the thunderstorm clouds. Should we shut down the formation? The intelligence personnel at the side said hurriedly. Looking at the thunderstorm clouds that kept raining down lightning, the Smoke Dragon warship could not help but grit his teeth. Shut it down. Upon hearing this, the intelligence personnel immediately turned around and shouted to the signal personnel on the high platform. Shut down the formation. Upon hearing this, the signal personnel on the high platform immediately signaled to shut down the formation. The news quickly spread among the Smoke Dragon warships. The thunder cores inside the Smoke Dragon warships were extinguished, and the dark clouds in the sky stopped churning and began to disperse. As the dark clouds dispersed, the thunder pills in the hands of the players suddenly lost their previous power. They could not even destroy the warship's defense formation. This made the players feel terrible. It felt as though they had been suppressed for a long time and had finally accumulated enough rage to unleash an ultimate skill. However, they did not expect that the ultimate skill would end in a few seconds. It was not satisfying enough. At this moment, the massacre of the Smoke Dragon warships began again. Without the thunderstorm clouds, the efficiency of the Smoke Dragon warships destroying the players' warships was much slower, but the players also lost the capital to fight against the Smoke Dragon warships. At this point in the battle, the players' warships had lost more than 20,000 warships, while the Smoke Dragon warships had lost 32. The gap was huge. As the battle continued, the damage to the players' warships continued to increase, and 2 more Smoke Dragon warships were sunk. Although the results were impressive, the Smoke Dragon warships were not feeling good. At this moment, what he wanted the most was not to destroy the player's fleet, but to escape. The loss of dozens of warships could only be described as a heavy loss for the Smoke Dragon warship. The spiritual materials needed to build a Spectre warship were incomparably huge. Losing 34 warships in one go really pained the Smoke Dragon warships. In comparison, the players were very happy. They had thought that they would return empty-handed from this battle, but they did not expect to sink dozens of warships. They had made a killing. As for escaping, it was impossible. Fight until the last person, then continue in a few days. If we don't destroy the players, what kind of evil force are we? Chapter 505. The battle lasted for 5 hours before it finally came to an end. Almost all the player warships were sunk, but Smoke Dragon was going crazy because he had lost 41 Smoke Dragon warships in this battle. He could not gather enough spiritual materials to build one Smoke Dragon warship in a year. The loss was so great that Smoke Dragon's body was trembling slightly. He took a deep breath and looked forward. There were less than 5,000 player warships left. Under the attack of the water giants, the damage of the player warships continued to increase. Attack! Attack! Smoke Dragon roared angrily. Smoke Dragon's fleet immediately spread out and attacked the remaining player warships. On the other hand, the players were very calm. In short, it was good that they made a profit. Perhaps to Smoke Dragon, the players' forces were already destroyed. After all, the loss was too great. But the players knew that this was just the beginning. There was still time. In the end, more than 5,000 player warships sank under the attack of the Smoke Dragon warships. Until the end, none of them escaped. When the battle ended, Smoke Dragon's expression was extremely ugly. He looked at the wrecked warships floating on the sea and immediately ordered, "Salvage the wrecks and see how much usable material there is." At this moment, he only wanted to make up for his losses. Soon, an intelligence officer hurried over. "Guild leader, the wrecks of the player clan's warships have all disappeared." "What did you say?" Smoke Dragon was in disbelief, thinking that he had heard wrong. "The wrecks of the player warships have all disappeared into thin air." The intelligence officer could not help but repeat, All disappeared." At this moment, Smoke Dragon's eyes widened. "You're telling me that the wrecks of more than 80,000 warships have all disappeared?" "Yes." The intelligence officer's face showed an awkward expression. Smoke Dragon immediately walked to the bow of the warship and looked toward the sea. The deep sea was filled with white waves, but the wrecks of the warships that floated on the surface of the sea had really disappeared. At this moment, Smoke Dragon's expression could only be described as dumbstruck. Meanwhile, the Sea King, who was hiding in the clouds and peeking below, was rolling on the floor with laughter. "Where did they go?" Smoke Dragon mumbled. "Guild leader, I think the player warships might be built with special materials that will dissolve in water after they are disassembled." The intelligence officer, who could not provide any useful information, could only give such a far-fetched explanation. "Melt your mother's head." The angry Smoke Dragon grabbed the intelligence officer's neck and threw him into the sea. "Find it for me. If you don't find it, don't come back." Looking at the empty sea, the intelligence personnel wanted to cry, but had no tears. Where the hell were they supposed to find this? Watching the fleet of warships slowly leave, the intelligence personnel tried to dive into the water to search. However, the water was still empty, and only a few fish occasionally swam by. Although the player clan was annihilated in this battle, the Smoke Dragon was not happy at all. Instead, he was extremely annoyed. It could be said that this battle had caused Yanlong's mentality to completely explode. On the way back, the Smoke Dragon was still feeling extremely irritated after traveling for several hours. Although he was in the Underworld Merchant Guild and was a member of the War Merchant Group, this position required a corresponding level of strength to sit in. Who knew how many people were eyeing the power of the War Merchant Group? For him, this loss was equivalent to losing nearly 50 years of profit. Just as the Smoke Dragon was feeling annoyed, a figure leisurely floated past the bow of the warship. This person was chubby and carried a turtle shell on his back. He had a harmless look on his face. Although he was flying, his eyes were closed and his body was drooping as if he was sleeping. F***CK off. Yanlong, who was in a bad mood, immediately took action and fiercely slapped. Accompanied by the appearance of a blue stream of light, it quickly swept toward the person. Slap! At this time, the warship's protective shield suddenly popped up. The slap hit the protective shield and suddenly rebounded, hitting the smoke dragon's body and sending him flying backward, crashing into the mast. F*CK. Who the F*CK activated the protective shield? Are you a F*King Pig? The smoke dragon stood up angrily and roared. The people on the warship standing on the high platform looked at each other, but no one answered. The smoke dragon glared at them fiercely, then looked at Dr. Hai again. His expression gradually became ferocious. Right now, he needed a target to vent his emotions. Thinking of this, the smoke dragon floated into the air and reached out to grab Dr. Hai. At this time, the warship's protective shield suddenly appeared again, and the smoke dragon who hit the protective shield was bounced back again. F*CK your mother. Who the F*CK activated at this time? The smoke dragon was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. Chairman, no one activated it. It automatically popped up. A member of the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce, standing on the high platform, replied in a low voice. You? The Smoke Dragon took a deep breath and calmed his emotions. He planned to capture Dr. Hai first and then pursue this matter. This time, the Smoke Dragon floated into the air carefully, fearing that the warship's protective shield would automatically pop up. Fortunately, the protective shield did not appear this time. This made the Smoke Dragon heave a sigh of relief. Then, he once again grabbed Dr. Hai with a ferocious expression. However, just as he was about to grab the Zhonghai doctor, a ray of light swept over him and sent him flying. Which bastard activated the gilded cannon? The disheveled Smoke Dragon shouted angrily in the direction of the warship. The people on the warship below trembled and did not dare to answer. This was because no one was operating the warship now. Chairman, I think it's a misfire. At this time, one of them mustered up the courage to shout at the Smoke Dragon. I'm leaving my ass. I'll deal with you guys later. The red-eyed Smoke Dragon did not believe it and turned his hand again to grab Dr. Hai. Just as he was about to grab Dr. Hai, he suddenly stopped and turned to look at the direction of the warship. Fortunately, there was no misfire this time. However, his eyes widened very quickly because all the other warships behind him had misfired. Beams of gilded fire cannonballs shot toward him like a crimson meteor shower. F*CK. The Smoke Dragon wanted to kill someone. At this moment, he even suspected that the members of the guild were plotting a rebellion behind his back and were preparing to assassinate him to take over. A mass misfire? This is too F*King fake. Thinking of this, the Smoke Dragon quickly turned his body and began to dodge the attack of the gilded cannon. Boom, boom, boom. Countless gilded fire cannonballs fell and flames splattered everywhere. Although he dodged all of them, the Smoke Dragon was still covered in dust. At this time, he turned to look at Dr. Hai. However, he was shocked to find out that Dr. Hai was still sleeping with his eyes closed under the intense bombardment of the cannonballs. It was as though none of the cannonballs had hit Dr. Hai, and the aftershock did not hurt him at all. This is too lucky. The Smoke Dragon could not believe it. He turned to look at the members of the warship. Those members instinctively took a step back with innocent expressions on their faces, although they wanted to explain that it was really a mass misfire this time. Even they themselves felt that it was too F*King fake, and that it was too F*King premeditated murder. After glaring at his subordinates fiercely, the Smoke Dragon turned to look at Dr. Hai again. This time, he did not choose to attack at close range. Instead, he waved his hand and created a distorted space. He did not believe that he could not kill this person. The distorted space slowly moved toward Dr. Hai under the control of the Smoke Dragon. A cruel smile appeared on the Smoke Dragon's face. He could almost see the scene of the distorted space tearing Dr. Hai apart. However, just as the distorted space was about to come into contact with Dr. Hai, the surface of the sea suddenly surged and a huge wave rose. Under the Smoke Dragon's astonished expression, a huge tail that was hundreds of meters long emerged from the water and swept him fiercely, sending him flying. A huge head emerged from the water. After letting out a roar, it spat out a string of bubbles and slowly sank into the water. The Smoke Dragon was seriously injured by this attack, and flew far away. Finally, he fell into the water and slowly sank. "It's so noisy. Can't you let me sleep?" At this time, Dr. Hai woke up and rubbed his sleepy eyes. He looked at the members of the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce, who were standing on the warship's high platform not far away, and looked at the surface of the sea. After a while, he closed his eyes again and fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 506. Recently, two pieces of news from the Empty Sea region and the Koalong Sea region had stirred up heated discussions among the various forces in the sea region. The first news came from Black Reef Island. The player clan was completely wiped out under the attack of the Smoke Dragon fleet. This news caused a huge uproar in these two seas. Many of the sea region factions were no longer as unfamiliar with the player clan as they were in the past. As their interactions with the player clan deepened, many of the sea region factions even felt that the player clan was a strong competitor for the future overlord of the sea region. He had incomparably great potential. Being destroyed in such a manner was beyond the expectations of many sea region forces. At that moment, the reputation of the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce resounded throughout the two seas. This made the various forces who were already afraid of them realize how powerful the Smoke Dragon fleet was. But soon, another piece of news came out. The Smoke Dragon was severely injured and on the verge of death. No one knew where this news had come from, but the authenticity of it caused a heated discussion among the various sea region powers. In the beginning, many forces in the sea region were skeptical. After all, the Smoke Dragon was a powerhouse in the Ghost Emperor realm. How could he be seriously injured or even on the verge of death after a battle with the player clan? This could be seen from the damage suffered by the Smoke Dragon warship in this battle. If more than half of the Smoke Dragon warship had been destroyed after the battle, then the various forces could understand that the battle had been extremely intense. It was also understandable that the Smoke Dragon warship had been heavily injured. However, the Smoke Dragon fleet had only lost over 40 warships in this battle. It could be said to be a completely one-sided battle. How could the Smoke Dragon fleet be injured? The forces of the various seas only treated this as a rumor, and there were only a few who believed it. But a few days later, when it was time for the second gathering of the forces in the sea region, the Black Reef Island announced that the meeting would be postponed. The specific date was unknown. This announcement instantly made the various oceanic forces recall the rumors of Smoke Dragon being injured. In the past few days, not only did the Smoke Dragon not show up, but even the fleet that he led didn't go to the sea to investigate the sea plunder incident. Everything was very strange. Under such circumstances, many forces began to believe that Smoke Dragon was seriously injured and on the verge of death. Even if all the merchant associations on Black Reef Island tried to refute the rumor, no one would believe it without the appearance of the Smoke Dragon. Instead, they would suspect that the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association was trying to cover it up. As the saying goes, if you are not sick, you should take 2 steps. The appearance of the real person is more reliable than any other method of refuting rumors. Continuously refuting the rumors without any substantial response would only make people more suspicious. At this moment, the Smoke Dragon Trade Association was in great trouble. At this moment, inside Black Reef Island, Vice President Smoke Wolf stood outside the Spirit Cave, where Smoke Dragon was recuperating, his face gloomy as he paced back and forth. At this moment, a merchant with a head full of white hair walked quickly from the side. Vice Guild Leader Smoke Wolf. What's the situation with Guild Leader Smoke Dragon? Everyone is talking about the Guild Leader being heavily injured. The situation is very bad for us. Guild Leader Black Reef. Who leaked this information? Smoke Wolf asked the white-haired old man as he stood behind the white-haired old man. When the white-haired old man heard that, he shook his head. I don't know. After the fleet returned, this news appeared out of thin air on the various trading islands and then spread to the 2 seas. Clearly, it was secretly done by some force. Damn it. Yin Lang couldn't help but clench his fists. Not only did the fleet suffer huge losses in the battle with the player clan, but they also didn't expect the Smoke Dragon to be seriously injured by Tao Wu on the way back. If the crew hadn't rescued it in time and used a large amount of healing spiritual materials to stabilize its injuries, then brought it back to Black Reef Island for treatment. The smoke dragon might have been dead. Smoke Wolf, who was stationed on Black Reef Island at that time, couldn't help but be stunned when he heard the news. The first thing he did was to block the news of the smoke dragon's injury. Otherwise, the smoke dragon fleet would be in danger. Although the smoke dragon fleet was now the War Chamber of Commerce, no force dared to attack them. But the name of the War Chamber of Commerce was coveted by many forces. If the news of the fleet being damaged and the smoke dragon dying spread, the most direct impact would be that many forces would fight for the War Chamber of Commerce title of the smoke dragon fleet. Moreover, if this news spread to the upper echelons of the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce, they would also reconsider the smoke dragon fleet to see if they still had the qualifications to be the War Chamber of Commerce. Smoke Wolf didn't even dare to think of such consequences. If they lost the title of the War Chamber of Commerce, not to mention the huge annual loss of profits, just the chambers of commerce and sea forces they offended would be enough to kill them. Therefore, Smoke Wolf chose to block the news without hesitation. But he didn't expect that the news would still leak out and spread to the two seas in such a short time. Perhaps it wouldn't take long for the upper echelons of the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce to be spread by the chambers of commerce they offended. At this moment, Smoke Wolf and his subordinates were as anxious as ants on a hot pan. Not only did their attempts to refute the rumors not work, but it also led to worse consequences. Now that the smoke dragon was still unconscious, the morale of the entire fleet was low, and the situation was not optimistic. Not only did the battle with the player clan not bring them the joy of victory, but the specific losses could no longer be described as huge. At this moment, Smoke Wolf only hoped that his brother, Smoke Dragon, would recover from his injuries quickly so that he could personally refute the rumors and suppress the worsening situation. But what they didn't expect was yet to come. Because all the members of their enemy, the player clan, had been resurrected at the Mansion of the Dead in full health. After this battle, the player clan also saw the many shortcomings on their side. Then, the direction of the discussion on the forum changed because the players realized how much of a disadvantage they had in a head-on battle with the Smoke Dragon fleet. As long as Smoke Dragon was around, the Neptune's pardon in his hands was simply a divine weapon of naval warfare, and the players had no power to resist at all. This time, they mainly relied on the Thunder Pellet to attract the lightning and blow up dozens of Smoke Dragon warships. Otherwise, the outcome could only be described as tragic, and it would be a complete formality. After this, the players didn't even need to think to know that Smoke Dragon would definitely not activate the Thunderstorm Cloud Matrix when fighting them in the future. Therefore, a new strategy was very important. However, the players' mentality was still very good. After all, they were players. Their enemies came wave after wave, but they still stood firm. Just as the players were discussing how to continue to sanction the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association, a player made a suggestion. This suggestion had a unique thought circuit, and it caused a heated discussion among the players. When I was researching forging skills recently, I thought of an advanced ability in forging, disassembly, and decomposition. I think this ability will definitely be useful in this battle. Author, Lin Tai Content. Let me first introduce myself. I am a lifestyle player in the Mansion of the Dead, and my sub-profession is a forging master. 3 days ago, the leader of the Dark Bloodlines Guild asked me to forge a batch of naval warfare tools. At that time, I accepted this task and then started to forge the tools according to the blueprint. However, during the forging process, due to a mistake during the casting process, many parts that were supposed to be assembled were smelted together. I really want to kill my stupid son. As a result, all the parts were scrapped. Since the spiritual iron and spiritual materials were all provided by the Dark Bloodlines Guild, the loss was undoubtedly very huge. At that time, I wanted to salvage the situation and see if I could disassemble these smelted parts. For this reason, I specifically looked for Master Tongwa and consulted him. Then, Master Tongwa told me about an advanced ability for forging masters, disassembly, and decomposition. In order to recover the loss, I stayed in the Mansion of the Dead library for a few days to read up on the specific principles and operating methods of disassembly and decomposition. After that, I tried repeatedly during which several assembled parts were scrapped. However, I finally succeeded. I really disassembled all the melted parts of the machine. Therefore, I suddenly thought, since the smoke dragon warship is so hard that we can't do anything about it, can we sneak in and disassemble the parts of their warship? The most important thing is that we can use the parts that we dismantled. Although the success rate is very low and it requires excellent skills, there are so many of us players. It shouldn't be a problem to disassemble one warship a day, right? This is my suggestion. Perhaps everyone can give it a try. Another thing to mention, the technique of disassembly and decomposition is not easy to master, and the success rate is not high. However, don't be afraid of target without practice. The smoke dragon warship is waiting for you. Forum, A_large_wolf dog, dumbfounded dog. You can do that? Now that you mention it, I can almost see the disassembly team on the way. Captain of the demolition officers, I heard that you guys are calling for our demolition club. Do you want to join us? Tong Gua's arrogant face, JPG, Shueli_the_strongest. What the F *CK, Uncle Lin Tai is awesome. Disassembly tactics? If we don't fight head-on, we'll disassemble all their warships? Sea King shocked face. JPG, Assassin_Creed. 666. After reading Uncle Lin Tai's post, I can almost see the members of the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association doubting their lives after waking up from a nap. Exciting, laughing emoji, Dogball_Taba. This is too cruel, but I like it. Chana's grin emoji. Lin Tai's suggestion could be said to be ingenious. All the players were thinking about how to rely on tactics or improve their strength to defeat the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association head-on. Lin Tai's suggestion caught many of the players off guard. It was unexpected. However, when they thought about it carefully, they realized that it did make sense. Moreover, the profession of blacksmith was the only profession in the entire server that had no limit and was open to all players. In other words, every player could actually give it a try. In an instant, the Mansion of the Dead's library was flooded with people. The players enthusiastically participated and began to study the branch of blacksmith's ability, disassembly, and decomposition. Even Lu Wu, who was behind the scenes, did not expect the players' actions. According to Bailey, the player's idea was totally feasible. Although the success rate was very low, even a Spectre warship like the Smoke Dragon warship could not handle the number of players. There would always be a few successful cases among the attempts. As long as they were successful, the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association would suffer a huge loss. The player's current attempt had once again confirmed Lu Wu's original idea. The player's potential was limitless. They could always find a way to defeat their enemies. Just like the Mahogany House building battle during the invasion of the evil spirits, this time, the players' battle tactics were on the scene again. Due to the huge number of players entering the library during this period, Lu Wu had decisively expanded the area of the folded space in the library so that the players would not be unable to study. Soon, the strategy to learn disassembly and decomposition was posted on the forum by Lin Tai, who was one step ahead. The learning craze spread again. Although it was painful to learn, every Battle Royale player had a sense of superiority. After all, no other game could be as hardcore as Battle Royale. As for learning, the players had also changed from being surprised at the beginning to getting used to it. This was also what Lu Wu wanted to see. His Calamity army was growing. Chapter 507. Kuelong Ocean, Black Reef Island. Early in the morning, Yin Wolf, who hadn't slept well all night, walked to the coast. He was extremely frustrated. Too many things had happened recently. The Smoke Dragon Merchant Association was in a great crisis. If they couldn't get through it, they would be completely destroyed. When he arrived at the coast, the sun was just rising. Under the red sun, the Smoke Dragon fleet was like a group of majestic giants lying on the coast. Seeing this, Yin Wolf couldn't help but sigh. Although many things had happened, fortunately, there was still this fleet. No matter what, they still had a chance. Thinking of this, Yin Wolf continued to walk forward and began to patrol the warships. At this moment, his expression suddenly froze. Not far away, the spot where Warship 176 was docked was now empty. This scene shocked Yin Wolf. He immediately floated into the air and began to carefully examine the warships below. However, to his surprise, Battleship 176 had really disappeared. "Where's the crew on duty?" Yin Wolf couldn't help but roar. No one responded. Just when Yin Wolf was about to roar again, he suddenly noticed that there seemed to be a figure underwater where Warship 176 was docked. He immediately flashed and scooped up the figure from the water. Woo 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 woo. At this moment, the crew on duty, who had been tied up for a night, began to sob in grief and indignation. Yin Wolf's expression was gloomy. He pulled the seaweed stuffed in his mouth and shouted angrily. What the hell happened? Vice President, Warship 176 was stolen. The crew on duty said with a sad face. Slap. Yin Wolf slapped his face and shouted angrily. What the hell is going on? Without the exclusive seal of the Smoke Dragon Guild, who could drive the warship? Are you King crazy? Yin Wolf was obviously furious. He tightened his grip on his subordinate's hand. The subordinate was so scared that his face turned pale. Vice President, they didn't drive it. They directly dismantled Warship 176. The subordinate quickly answered in order to survive. Dismantled? Yin Wolf almost couldn't help but pinch his subordinate to death. This was even more unreliable than driving the warship away. After all, when the entire Spectre warship was built, all the materials were melted together. How could it be dismantled? Tell me the details. Yin Wolf took a deep breath to calm himself down and asked with widened eyes. Upon hearing this, the member of the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce quickly nodded. Vice President, I was on night duty last night. At that time, I stayed on the main ship to keep watch, but late at night, I heard knocking sounds coming from nearby. At that time, I was very puzzled, so I followed the sound. In the end, I found many black shadows lurking under Battleship 176, holding something that I don't know what, and they were knocking at Battleship 173. There were already many holes on Battleship 173, and these holes didn't seem to be damaged, but more like missing parts, as if a part of it was missing. At that time, I was very scared and was about to return to the main ship to sound the alarm, but I saw two black shadows appear in front of me, and then my vision went black. When I woke up, I found myself underwater. Mother of Asterisker, since you noticed something, why didn't you sound the alarm earlier? When Yin Lang heard this, he couldn't help but slap him again. Vice President, I felt that in this sea area, no one would dare to harm us. At that time, I thought it was just some sea beast that made the noise, and by the time I realized something was wrong, it was already too late. The member said with a sad face. Upon hearing this, Yin Lang threw the member into the water, then turned his head to look at the original location of Battleship 173, and his face was extremely gloomy. After being in various sea areas for so many years, this was the first time that Yin Lang heard of someone stealing a battleship. In fact, it wasn't that they didn't have security measures for the battleships. First of all, every day, there would be a member of the Ghost Commander level or above on the main ship as a lookout, looking after all the battleships, and could send a signal to inform the other members if anything happened. Secondly, every member on duty would drink a soul fire before performing a night watch. As long as the soul lamp left on the island was extinguished, all the members sleeping on the island would also receive a notification. Most importantly, these battleships had Yin Lang's soul imprint. Without the life imprint given by President Yin Lang, it was impossible to operate them, let alone drive them away. Moreover, this was the Black Reef Island, the temporary territory of the Smoke Dragon fleet. Who would dare to be presumptuous here? With so many safeguards, Yin Lang did not even think that something would go wrong with the battleship. However, he did not expect that these thieves would kidnap the members on duty, but did not kill them. Then, they stole Battleship 176 by dismantling it. Although Yin Lang did not understand how these thieves managed to dismantle the Smoke Dragon battleship that had already been melted into one. However, in Yin Lang's opinion, this method was simply too despicable and shameless. At this moment, Yin Lang was so angry that his hair stood on end. It was a troubled time now, and the loss of a battleship was not a small matter. It really made him angry. Pass down my order. From tonight onwards, all members of the Chamber of Commerce are to spend the night on the battleship. Looking at the timid subordinate below, Yin Lang instantly glared and rebuked him. "Yes, I'll go right now." The subordinate was relieved and quickly swam towards the shore. From this day onwards, all members of the Smoke Dragon fleet lost the opportunity to rest on the island, and all moved to the battleship. These battleships originally had rooms specially for resting and sleeping. However, the living environment was obviously incomparable to that on the shore. Not only was the environment cramped, but it was also very humid inside. At night, the waves would rise and fall. Although there was a stabilizing function, one would still feel very uncomfortable after staying for a long time. However, none of the members of the Chamber of Commerce dared to object to Yin Lang's decision. This was a critical period, and all the members of the Smoke Dragon fleet knew that if they could not survive this time, the Smoke Dragon fleet would be finished. As members of the Smoke Dragon fleet, they would also be finished. After that, the entire Smoke Dragon fleet entered a state of alert. Even Yin Lang personally guarded the fleet every night. This was because he clearly knew that no accidents could happen before the Smoke Dragon fleet woke up. Otherwise, the situation would continue to worsen, and the future of the Smoke Dragon fleet would be worrying. However, his thinking was still too naive. That night, countless black shadows quietly dived towards the Smoke Dragon fleet from underwater. The thieving began once more. That night, all the members of the Smoke Dragon fleet were awakened by the knocking sounds. All of them immediately rushed out of the battleship to check, and to their surprise, they discovered that the attackers this time were actually the player clan. Therefore, a massacre was unavoidable. The strength of the players was obviously incomparable to that of the members of the Smoke Dragon fleet, and they were all quickly killed. However, to their surprise, just as they returned to the battleship, before they could close their eyes, another wave of black-clothed people sneaked in under the cover of the night. Ding, ding, dang, dang. The knocking sounds rang out again. Having no choice, the members of the Smoke Dragon fleet could only hastily face the enemies again, and the massacre began again. However, all of this was just the beginning. That night, the members of the Smoke Dragon fleet were tortured to the point of insanity. Wave after wave of thieves seemed to be endless. Every time they were about to go to sleep, these thieves would come. For a whole night, even the Smoke Dragon fleet couldn't count how many players they had killed. In the end, they had no choice but to turn on the battleship's protective shield that night, and only then did they successfully fall asleep. However, the next night, the players came again. Perseverance was like dripping water wearing away a stone. The players used their actions to perfectly illustrate this concept. Unless the Smoke Dragon fleet could turn on its protective shield 24 hours a day, regardless of energy consumption, the players would dare to come up and hammer a few times. These days, both the members of the Smoke Dragon fleet and the members of the Chamber of Commerce gradually looked haggard. Because in the following days, the thieves of the player clan dared to come openly during the day. Seeing the player clan, the Smoke Dragon fleet went from anger to helplessness to fear. The journey in its heart was extremely tortuous. When it came to torturing the enemy, the players were excellent. After all, the number of players was there. As long as 1/3 of the players went to harass them every day, the Smoke Dragon fleet would feel extremely uncomfortable. On the player forum, the disassembled parts of the Smoke Dragon warship, which were above level 15, were being sold at high prices, attracting the envy of many players. These disassembled parts were devoured by the players' warships, and the experience gained was unimaginable. It could be said that all the major guilds wanted to buy them. There would always be more tycoons in a war than rare items, and the supply of these parts soon exceeded the demand. Although the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce's tight security made it much more difficult to steal warship parts, the players were still having fun. After all, the profits were too great. Whether they sold it or used it themselves, it was a guaranteed profit. Therefore, the harassment did not decrease, but became even more intense. At first, they ambushed under the cover of the night, but now, the players were simply robbing in the open. They headed to Black Reef Island 24 hours a day, swung their hammers when they arrived, and continued after 3 hours if they died. Smoke Dragon fleet could only lead the fleet to fight. After half a month, Smoke Dragon Fleet and the fleet had lost a lot of weight, and their mental state was extremely poor. It wasn't that they didn't think of leaving Black Reef Island and escaping. However, the Smoke Dragon Fleet was still recovering in the Spirit Cave inside Black Reef Island. How could Smoke Dragon Fleet feel at ease leaving just like that? If anything happened to the Smoke Dragon Fleet, the Smoke Dragon Fleet could immediately disband. Otherwise, they would have to face the suppression of the major factions. Moreover, these Smoke Dragon warships were all bound to the Smoke Dragon Fleet's soul. They had the seal bestowed by the Smoke Dragon and could operate the warship, but they weren't the warship's master. It could be said that they were now in a dilemma. Faced with the harassment of the players, they could only endure, but couldn't retreat. As the players' open robbery became more and more intense, it also attracted the attention of the major factions in the sea. The news that the player clan hadn't been destroyed instantly spread across the two seas. It was also because of the player clan's locust-like behavior. Once again, the players were crowned as the top gangster leader faction in the two seas. However, under such circumstances, the Smoke Dragon still didn't appear, which caused the major factions to speculate. At this moment, the news that the Smoke Dragon was heavily injured, or even on the verge of death, seemed to be confirmed. Therefore, the thing that Smoke Dragon was most worried about happened. 2 letters departed from Exinamo Island, carried by Hei Sui, the liege of the Mute Sea Nation, to the underworld Sea Merchant Alliance branch in the soul-devouring ocean. One of them was detailed explanation of the Smoke Dragon Fleet's combat power, which described the Smoke Dragon Fleet's current combat power. The other was War Merchant's application letter. At this moment, the mastermind who had been stabbing them in the back finally made his move. The Smoke Dragon Fleet's current situation was exactly what he wanted to see. As long as he grasped this opportunity, he could soar to the sky. Chapter 508. For half a month, they went from being sneaky to being open and aboveboard. The mentality of the players gradually changed as well. In order to break down the Smoke Dragon warships for high-grade parts, the players racked their brains. After all, the benefits were huge. For most players, it was also an opportunity. Therefore, dismantling ships became a new channel for the players to carry bricks. Although this method of carrying bricks was more dangerous than cutting trees, fishing, and farming monsters, the benefits were incomparable to those of the previous methods. There was even a player in the forum who specially calculated the data and published a comparison post. In the post, the player used the data to explain why pirate ships were more profitable than activities such as cutting trees and fishing. This further aroused the player's passion for pirate ships. As a result, the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce suffered unspeakably. At this moment, on Black Reef Island, Smoke Wolf sat on the ground with a haggard look after defeating another wave of player clans. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hair was disheveled. He looked at the calm sea with lingering fear. After making sure there were no players, Smoke Wolf sighed and turned to his subordinate beside him. "Give me the intelligence officer." When the subordinate heard this, he looked embarrassed. Vice President, the intelligence officer was thrown into the sea by the president. He's probably still looking for the wreckage of the warship left behind in the void ocean. Smoke Wolf was speechless. "Then you go. I'll assign you a warship with 30 people. Go to the soul-devouring sea and ask for reinforcements from the Acheron Chamber of Commerce branch." Vice President, "Do we really need to ask for reinforcements?" The President. Before the subordinate could finish, Smoke Wolf interrupted him with a wave of his hand. "Go. I'll explain to the President when he wakes up." Although the subordinate had many doubts, he nodded and immediately turned to leave. After the subordinate left, Smoke Wolf looked exhausted. It wasn't that he didn't want to hold on, but he knew that if this went on, the Smoke Dragon fleet wouldn't last until Smoke Dragon woke up. He clearly saw the player clan's perseverance in the past few days. Under the crazy harassment, they didn't even have time to rest. They truly attacked 24 hours a day. From the initial anger to now, Smoke Wolf felt like he was about to vomit from all the killing. Smoke Wolf was sure that he had killed more enemies in the past half a month than he had in the past half a month after living for nearly 10,000 years. As a result, Smoke Wolf felt disgusted whenever he saw the player clan. Even though he had the strength of a Ghost King and his body could still withstand it, his spirit could not. If it was a normal battle in the sea, even if his fleet was damaged, he would grit his teeth and fight on. This was because asking for help from the Underworld Merchant Guild meant that they would not be able to complete the task given by their superiors. As the War Chamber of Commerce, they were supposed to help the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce deal with all sorts of problems. If they couldn't even do this, the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce would reconsider their qualifications as a War Chamber of Commerce. Now that the Smoke Dragon was heavily injured and the fleet had lost a lot, the test at this time was fatal. The Smoke Wolf clearly knew that under this situation, the possibility of them passing the test was very low. However, if they didn't ask for reinforcements, the Smoke Dragon fleet would still be in great danger under the harassment of the player clan. In the past half a month, 7 warships had been destroyed, and the remaining warships had more or less suffered damage. Every time the players arrived, they would devour the warships like locusts. They were crazy to the point that they didn't care about their lives. They were exhausted from all the killing. If this continued, the Smoke Wolf even suspected that within a few months, this fleet would no longer exist under the devouring of the player clan. Most importantly, if he could see results from killing the player clan, he would still be able to hold on. However, the problem was that it had been more than half a month. They had killed wave after wave, but the number of attacking player clan did not decrease at all. Instead, it was increasing. This was also the reason why the Smoke Wolf felt like breaking down. If it wasn't because of this, he wouldn't have clenched his teeth and asked for reinforcements. The player clan did not oppress them in terms of strength, but it brought them mental devastation. This was far more difficult for the Smoke Wolf to deal with than the oppression of strength. Right now, the Smoke Wolf didn't know how long he could hold on. However, the Smoke Dragon was still unconscious. He had no other choice but to hold on. After the warship requesting for reinforcements sailed away from the coast, the Smoke Wolf sighed again. He still remembered clearly that when the 2 brothers received the mission to investigate the plunder incident in the Kuelong Ocean, they were excited. Because every time they went out on a mission, there would be huge profits to be reaped. And that was exactly what they did. The major chambers of commerce continuously sent over spiritual materials and resources, allowing them to make a lot of money. However, they didn't expect to fall into the hands of the player clan. After the battle at the Void Ocean, the Smoke Dragon fleet had suffered a great loss. At this moment, the siren suddenly sounded. Then, the Smoke Wolf heard a shout. The player clan is here. Prepare for battle. Prepare for battle. Blarg. The Smoke Wolf couldn't help but retch. However, he had to stand up, pick up the sword beside him again, and lead the members of the Chamber of Commerce to kill the incoming player clan, the Nibbling Group. In fact, the players didn't want to force others to kill and then break them down. In fact, the players felt that this could be resolved through negotiation. For example, the Smoke Wolf gave up on intercepting them and let them destroy the ships and decompose the parts in peace. Then, everyone could coexist peacefully. This was also mentioned to the Smoke Wolf by some dumb players. However, the Smoke Wolf's answer was a stab in the head. Therefore, the negotiation broke down, and the players could only continue to steal the ships in this way. In fact, to most of the players, they were suffering because the difficulty of this game was too high. In order to steal the parts of the Smoke Dragon warship, most of the players died again and again. 3 hours passed, and another 3 hours passed. In the end, most of the players didn't even manage to decompose a single warship part. This group of players had a lot of resentment. They felt that their luck was terrible, and they were killed every time. They had enough of these days. However, every time they saw on the forum that the stolen parts of the Smoke Dragon warship were bought by the large guilds at a high price, the guilds exchanged them for a set of high-level equipment. How could they not be jealous? Obviously, they were envious, jealous, and even cursed take a spear hit in their hearts. However, they were unwilling to give up. What if they succeeded the next time? Wouldn't it be a huge loss if they gave up halfway? Therefore, they could only persuade themselves that they would succeed the next time and continue to kill. They wanted to be lucky once in the process of destroying the ships and then rise to fame. Most of the unsuccessful gamers had this thought in mind and believed that perseverance would lead to victory. Now, when the gamers saw Smoke Wolf, they had a headache. They felt that he was a malignant tumor. He kept increasing the difficulty of carrying bricks. They couldn't stand him. However, they couldn't defeat him and could only use their lives to destroy the ships. This process was like a card drawing game. If it didn't succeed, there was a high chance that they would be killed. The next card drawing would be 3 hours later. In fact, the gamers were suffering, but Smoke Wolf was in more pain. Both sides were torturing each other. One side was fighting for benefits, while the other side was protecting their own benefits. They gritted their teeth in pain and persevered. According to a gamer, he was fighting for 24 hours a day, every 3 hours, and he died at least 5 times a day. Do you think he was feeling good? Fortunately, while the gamers were in pain, there were motivating rewards. At least they had something to look forward to, which was their source of motivation. In comparison, Smoke Wolf's suffering was more than 100 times that of the gamers. It was so unbearable that he was on the verge of collapse. Not only were there no benefits, but the warships were destroyed every day. The worst thing was that the player clan couldn't be killed. After persevering for 3 days, Smoke Wolf felt like he was in trance. He was considered lucky because some of the crew members were tortured to insanity. After killing a wave of player clan members, they continued to brandish their weapons and shout, "Kill, kill, kill, kill." They had fallen into a state of madness and had completely collapsed. Faced with such a situation, Smoke Wolf was at a loss. He thought of trying to motivate the members of the Chamber of Commerce and get them to persevere a little longer. But in reality, he couldn't say any words of encouragement because he himself was on the verge of collapse. He couldn't squeeze anything out of his mind, just like a ball of paste. Even if he closed his eyes and wanted to rest for a while, the scene of the player clan's attack would suddenly appear in his mind. He would wake up at the start, grab his sword, and rush forward to fight. It became a conditioned reflex, so practiced that Smoke Wolf felt sorry for himself. For the past few days, Smoke Wolf looked forward to the arrival of reinforcements every day so that they could have a good rest, even if it was half a day or even an hour. He couldn't stand the days of fear any longer. "Guild Master!" At this moment, a shout came, and Smoke Wolf jumped up reflexively. "Guild Master! Someone committed suicide!" Clatter! His sword fell on the deck. Smoke Wolf's bloodshot face showed a dull expression. He turned to look at his subordinate. "Don't report such things to me in the future." After saying that, he fell to the ground again and looked at the blue sky with listless eyes, cherishing the short rest. "Guild Master!" At this moment, another shout made Smoke Wolf grab the sword beside him reflexively and jump up. "Guild Master, there's a ship in the distance. It's a warship that was sent out to request reinforcements. The reinforcements are here. The reinforcements are here." This shout was like a cardiac stimulant, making all the members of the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce, who were on the verge of collapse, cry tears of joy. The dull and oppressive atmosphere was broken at this moment, and all the members of the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce couldn't help but cheer. Many people shed tears on the spot, and even Smoke Wolf's eyes were moist. They had waited for this moment for far too long, and the reinforcements were the motivation for them to persevere until now. Although the process was extremely difficult and torturous, they managed to persevere until this moment. They were finally free. Ah! Smoke Wolf's long hair fluttered in the wind. He raised his sword and couldn't help but howl at the sea. After fighting in the sea for so many years, none of the members of the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce expected that they would be so excited for reinforcements. Thinking back to the most dangerous period in the past, when they defeated enemies several times their number, they were not as excited as they were now. The dark and torturous days were finally over. However, as the battleships approached, the smile on Smoke Wolf's face suddenly froze. Behind the battleships that they sent out for reinforcements, the clear word Mute hung high on the mast of the main ship, and a group of blue battleships with metallic luster followed closely behind. Smoke Wolf knew all the war chambers in the nearby sea area and had contact with them before. However, there was no Mute chamber commerce among these war chambers, And the only Mute Chamber of Commerce they knew was the Mute Sea Nation, which was the force that the Sea King was in. As the battleships approached, a figure suddenly leaped from the main ship. A black full moon appeared between the person's eyebrows, and the person quickly flew toward the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce. Vice Guildmaster, should we activate the protective shield? A subordinate asked quickly. No need, wait for him, Smoke Wolf said with a gloomy face. The Sea King's figure approached at this moment and landed on the front deck. Sea King, what are you doing here? Smoke Wolf immediately asked in a deep voice. Looking at the disheveled Smoke Wolf, a smile appeared on the Sea King's face. Then he took out a scroll from his halo. Why do you think I'm here? Chapter 509. Seeing the scroll in the Sea King's hand, Yin Lang's expression suddenly changed. Sea God's Pardon. That's right, it's the Sea God's Pardon. However, this one hasn't been inscribed with any Sea God runes, so it's not the completed Sea God's Pardon. Therefore, I still need to borrow something from your Chamber of Commerce to perfect it. Sea King, what do you mean? Yin Lang asked with a pale face. What do you think? Don't tell me you still don't understand. The Sea King smiled. Actually, when he saw the Sea King take out the Neptune's pardon, Yin Lang already knew that the Sea King must have gone to the Underworld Chamber of Commerce's Alliance branch. Otherwise, how could a Neptune's pardon scroll appear in his hands? This was because the Sea God's Pardon was the symbol of the War Chamber of Commerce. The Underworld Merchant Guild branch in the Devouring Sea controlled a total of 10 war merchant guilds. In other words, there were only 10 Neptune's pardon scrolls. The scroll in the Sea King's hand was blank, so it was obvious that he wanted to take the scroll from the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce and complete it. You're courting death. Sea King, with your strength, you are not worthy of the name of the War Chamber of Commerce. Do you really think that the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce is useless? Yin Lang suddenly shouted angrily, and he could not help but tighten his grip on the saber in his hand. Don't get agitated. Whether I'm worthy or not isn't up to you, nor is it up to me. It's up to this person. As soon as the Sea King finished speaking, a black shadow slowly appeared beside him. This figure was shrouded in shadows, appearing illusory yet real at the same time, drifting erratically. Seeing this figure, Yin Lang's expression became even uglier. He immediately lowered his head and said respectfully to the figure, Eldering, why have you come? The branch president has ordered us to come and check on the situation. At the same time, we will examine the qualifications of the Nuclear War Chamber of Commerce. Hearing this, the Smoke Wolf was terrified. Originally, it should have been the other war merchant groups that came to request for help. Although they would also be examined in the end, that was only after the supporting war merchant groups had dealt with the matter with them, and then the examining elder would come and examine them. However, Smoke Dragon would have woken up by then, and they would still have a chance to salvage the situation. However, Eldering had come at this time, when the Smoke Dragon Merchant Association was in the worst possible situation, which was completely out of Yin Lang's expectations. At this moment, he had a bad feeling. Looking at Yin Lang, who was forcing himself to smile in front of Eldering, the Sea King could not help but laugh. He had been planning this move ever since Smoke Dragon offended the player clan. Sending his subordinates to inform the player clan of the Smoke Dragon's attack was the first step in his plan. This was because the Sea King knew that the player clan was not a force that could be exterminated so easily. When both sides were heavily injured, there would definitely be a fisherman who would benefit from it. And he wanted to be the fisherman. Based on his understanding of the player clan and the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce, the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce would definitely suffer huge losses. Therefore, the Sea King had been waiting for the right time. Originally, he thought that the war between the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce and the player clan would last a long time. And in this naval battle, the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce's strength would gradually be depleted until it was impossible to recover. What the Sea King didn't expect was that everything would go surprisingly smoothly. As a core member of the Smoke Dragon Merchant Guild, Smoke Dragon was actually seriously injured and entered a state of near death. When the Sea King, who was hiding above the clouds, saw the Smoke Dragon being slapped into the water by Tao Wu, his excitement was indescribable. because this meant that the time was ripe. Subsequently, the Black Reef Island began to seal off the news of Yin Long's injury. However, the news still spread across the two seas and was known by various forces. Naturally, this was also his doing. After that, he sent his subordinate, Hei Sui, to the Underworld Chamber of Commerce's branch in the soul-devouring sea to report the situation of the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce and his own forces. He also applied to take over the War Chamber of Commerce's rights from the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce. After knowing the situation, the person in charge of the Underworld Chamber of Commerce's branch agreed to re-examine the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce's strength, but did not approve the Sea King's application to take over the War Chamber of Commerce's rights. This was because they needed to further examine whether the forces owned by the Sea King were qualified. And that was why Eldering came. Firstly, to examine the Sea King's forces. Secondly, to examine the current situation of the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce to see if they were qualified to continue holding the rights to the War Chamber of Commerce. After arriving at the Kolong Sea, Elder Ing first went to the Shima Island where the Sea King was. After the examination, he learned that the Sea King's strength had reached the Ghost Emperor realm. He immediately bestowed the Sea God's Pardon White Scroll to the Sea King. After that, he went to the Black Reef Island with the Sea King. This time, he wanted to examine the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce. Looking at the disheveled Smoke Wolf with bloodshot eyes, Elder Ying's hoarse voice was heard. "Smoke Wolf, what happened to you?" When Yin Wolf heard this, he did not dare to be negligent because he knew that the future of the Chamber of Commerce was now in the hands of Elder Ing. He quickly lowered his head and replied respectfully, "Elder Ing, there was an invasion just now and a battle broke out between us. That's why we're in such a sorry state. Please forgive me." "Oh? What kind of enemy made you look so sorry?" Eldering could not help but ask. "It's just a group of thieves. Eldering need not worry. Our Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce can handle it." Yin Wolf quickly replied, afraid that Elder Ing would doubt the strength of their Chamber of Commerce. When Elder Ing heard this, he nodded. "Where's Yin Dragon? Let him come and see me." Hearing Elder Ing calling for Yin Dragon, Yin Wolf knew that the worst situation had come. But he also knew that at this moment, he could not hide even if he wanted to. President Yin Dragon is injured and is currently recuperating in the spiritual cave on the island. "Bring me there." Elder Ying's hoarse voice was heard again. "Yes, I'll bring you there now." In the face of Elder Ying's request, Yin Wolf did not dare to refuse and could only grit his teeth and agree. Then he turned to look at his subordinates and said, "You guys continue to stay here. I'll bring Elder Ing to see the president." After giving the order, Yin Wolf's figure floated up and shot towards the Black Reef Island. When Sea King and Elder Ing saw this, they immediately followed, all the way to the spiritual cave inside the Black Reef Island. Yin Wolf's figure slowed down and descended. After he landed, the figures of Elder Ing and Sea King followed. "Elder Ing, the president is inside." After Yin Wolf finished speaking, he strode into the spiritual cave. The Sea King and Elder Ing immediately followed. This spiritual cave was where the Black Reef Chamber of Commerce stored spiritual materials and all kinds of treasures. The rock walls were inlaid with all kinds of precious pearls that sealed spiritual energy. The inside was filled with medicinal fragrance and abundant spiritual energy, forming white and light green clouds that were visible to the naked eye. At this moment, the seriously injured Yin Dragon was lying quietly on a stone platform inside the spiritual cave. The spiritual fog around him was the thickest in the entire spiritual cave. The white and light green fog enveloped him and expanded as he breathed. At this moment, Elder Ying's figure flashed and appeared in front of Yin Dragon. He pressed his hand on his chest. Suddenly, a thick black fog emerged from Elder Ying's hand and slowly seeped into Yin Dragon's body to investigate the internal condition of his body. After a moment of silence, Elder Ing withdrew his hand and turned to look at Yin Wolf. "Who did this to him?" Yin Wolf did not dare to hide and immediately answered, "The spirit of the void ocean, Tao Wu. How did he offend the spirit of the sea?" Hearing this, Elder Ing could not help but frown. "Elder Ing, It's not that the president offended the spirit of the sea, but Tao Wu happened to pass by, and when he turned over, his tail hit the president. It's really a coincidence. Hearing that, Elder Ing nodded his head. At first, he thought that Yin Dragon Chamber of Commerce offending the spirit of the sea was a troublesome matter for him, and the Acheron Chamber of Commerce behind him. After knowing that it was just a coincidence, he was no longer worried and said, "Yin Wolf, you two brothers have been with us for 400 years, right?" "Yes, the president and I have been with the Acheron Chamber of Commerce for more than 400 years. Do you know that the Yin Dragon Chamber of Commerce has actually suppressed many sea merchants in private and even directly asked for benefits? We all know about this." Elder Ying's words caused Yin Wolf's expression to change. Before he could answer, Elder Ying continued to speak. "In fact, every War Chamber of Commerce does this more or less. We can't be bothered because we know that every War Chamber of Commerce is ambitious and wants to improve. You even have the ambition to enter the central ocean of the Netherworld. Therefore, as long as your actions do not cross the line, we will never pursue it. Moreover, you are also very smart and know your limits. Therefore, we always turn a blind eye to it and do not pursue it." Hearing this, Yin Wolf's tense heart immediately relaxed, and he felt lucky to have escaped death. However, you must also understand the purpose of the War Chamber of Commerce's existence. Having ambition is a good thing. It will help you improve, but this also requires sufficient strength to match. The current strength of the Yin Dragon Chamber of Commerce seems to be somewhat inconsistent with the War Chamber of Commerce. Eldering, give us a chance. As long as the president wakes up, the Yin Dragon Chamber of Commerce's strength will still be enough to face any challenges and missions issued by the Chamber of Commerce. Yin Wolf quickly said, "The opportunity is not given by me, but earned through strength." The current situation of the Yin Dragon Chamber of Commerce does not meet the requirements of the War Chamber of Commerce, Eldering said with a sigh. Eldering, even if the Yin Dragon Chamber of Commerce does not meet the requirements, what right does the Sea King have? At this time, Yin Wolf looked at the Sea King who was standing aside angrily. "I have investigated a situation. As a War Chamber of Commerce, the president must have the combat strength of a Ghost Emperor or above. He meets the requirements. I have also checked the forces under him, and they also meet the requirements. How is that possible? Even if he has the strength of a Ghost Emperor, his Mute Sea nation can't even compare to the Langia Island Coalition force. How can he compete with the Yin Dragon fleet? If we fight, the Yin Dragon fleet can easily destroy his forces." Hearing this, Yin Wolf's face was full of disbelief. "I'm sorry. Recently, the national strength has suddenly increased, and we have obtained the Nethersea nation's stone statue army. I'm really sorry to disappoint you." While explaining, the Sea King could not help but attack him. In this aspect, he had learned the essence of the player family's verbal canon, to kill people's hearts. And this stone statue army was the army that was left in the Nethersea relic after Tian Lan disappeared. Although he had not found a way to control it, he had already moved this stone statue army to Xinmo Island. As a potential force, this stone statue army was also within the scope of the review. Therefore, the Sea King passed the qualification review this time. Hearing this, Yin Wolf's face was as white as a sheet. He knew that everything was over. Now that Yin Dragon was still unconscious, he only had the combat strength of a late-stage Ghost King. How could he challenge the Sea King? No matter how much he said, it would be useless. It was cruel, but was also very realistic. The power that one possessed determined everything. The current situation was that the power that they possessed was not enough to support their rights and status. It was normal for them to be deprived. Looking at Eldering taking out the Sea God's Pardon scroll from the unconscious Yin Dragon, Yin Wolf could not help but clench his fists. However, he knew that he could not resist. From today onwards, the Mute Sea Nation will officially become the Mute Sea Merchants and belong to the Soul Devouring Netherworld Sea Branch. This Sea God's Pardon scroll has Yin Dragon's soul imprint. Use your blank scroll to devour it. As he spoke, Eldering passed the Sea God's Pardon scroll to the Sea King. Taking the sea god's pardon scroll, the Sea King could not help but smile. This time, he had become the biggest winner without sacrificing a single soldier. Chapter 510. After receiving Yanlong's Neptune's pardon scroll, the Sea King pressed it onto the blank scroll in his hand. Golden runes appeared as they danced and rushed towards the blank scroll in the Sea King's hand. Yanlong's Neptune's pardon scroll gradually dimmed, while the Sea King's pardon scroll glowed brighter. This symbolized the end of Yanlong's glory and the beginning of the Mute Trade Union's era. Yanlong's heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife when he saw this, but was powerless to stop it. Ever since they first set off from the fishing village, the two brothers had experienced too much. Their journey was full of hardships and obstacles. Their subordinates had died in battle one after another, but they still managed to withstand the violent storm and kept moving forward. When they obtained the qualification to join the War Chamber of Commerce, they thought that they had bid farewell to the days of killing and danger and that their future would be bright. But now everything was gone. Their future, dreams, hard work, and struggle were all gone like the moon in the water. Under the cruel law of survival, one wrong step would cost them a lot, so much so that Yanlang found it hard to accept. At this moment, he thought of the promise and oath he had once made, a promise that was more important than his life. Yanlang could not help but clench his fists. His body trembled slightly as he tore off his clothes, revealing his body that was covered in scars. From Yanlang's point of view, these scars were not a warrior's glory. They were just punishment for his resistance in order to live a less useless life. Every scar on the scroll recorded a crisis that was enough to kill him. He had survived all of them and was still alive until now. Yanlang looked at the Sea King. I came from a small fishing village. In our village, all the people who went out to hunt were warriors. Although they were not strong, they had the courage to fight against storms and tsunamis. They worked tirelessly for the survival of their people. However, they were also very stupid and did not know how to be flexible. They only knew how to guard their own land. Even though there was a shortage of food in the village, they still had to offer sacrifices to the strong clans every year. This caused many people to die of starvation every year. However, they were so stupid that they did not think of changing anything. They silently endured all the evil intentions from the outside world. The Sea King did not say anything and looked at Yanlang quietly. Until one day, two brothers wanted to change everything in the fishing village. Therefore, they chose to resist and chose to walk the path of becoming strong. They wanted to lead the entire village out of this desolate fishing village and welcome a better life. Smoke Wolf continued to speak. Back then, no one knew how difficult and dangerous this path was, but the entire village still chose to trust the two brothers unconditionally. With hot blood and beautiful hopes for the future, they followed them out of the fishing village to face the even crueler laws of survival. This journey lasted for millennia after millennia. The two brothers still remembered the oath they made back then, but the villagers fell one after another. In the end, all of them died in battle on this path to become strong. Living a mediocre life is sad, but at least we're still alive, right? How could this path be so easy to walk? When their mother died in battle, these two brothers gritted their teeth and persevered. When their father died in battle, they endured the pain and persevered. However, when the last of their clansmen, the old clan elder, also died in battle, they regretted their decision. At that moment, the two brothers no longer wanted to resist. They regretted the decision they made back then, which led to the destruction of everything in the fishing village. However, it was too late because the entire village was no longer here. Just as the two brothers were about to give up, the dying clan elder, who was lying in a pool of blood, used the last of his strength to say something. He told them to continue walking. Since you're already on the path, there's no turning back. You're the last hope of the Yin village, and you have to fight on behalf of the Yin village. At that moment, the two brothers saw the hope and trust in the clan elder's eyes. From that moment on, the two brothers from the fishing village swore that they would become the strongest. They would enter the central sea of the Yellow Spring and carve out a path for themselves to prove that they were not wrong. From then on, They never thought of giving up. From then on, no matter who their enemies were, they would not show mercy. They would take back everything they lost, 10 times, 100 times more. They would become the cruelest hunters, using any means necessary to strengthen themselves, to become stronger, until they could change everything. Shan Kuei's force, Blood Extermination Union, Sha Zhao's force. Along the way, no matter how strong their enemies were, they never stopped growing stronger. They would always come back after a desperate situation, becoming even more cruel and powerful than before, and then devour their enemies. This time it will not change. As soon as he finished speaking, Yin Lang raised the blade in his hand and drew a mark on his chest. Blood dripped down, but Yin Lang didn't even blink. This mark represents the humiliation you've brought me. If there's a chance in the future, I'll return it to you 100 times, 1,000 times more. From now on, the Smoke Dragon Merchant Guild will leave the Yellow Spring Merchant Guild and start anew. After saying that, Yin Lang strode to Yin Long, bent down, and picked him up. Then, he turned around and left without looking back. Looking at Yin Lang leaving, the Sea King was expressionless, but there was a look of contemplation in his eyes. At this moment, Eldering sighed. It's because there are people who want to change their fates and become strong that the Sea Domain becomes so interesting. Just like the Smoke Dragon Brothers. What's the point of becoming strong? To enslave others? The Sea King suddenly asked. Eldering heard and couldn't help but laugh. He then asked, "Do you want to be a good person or a bad person?" The Sea King's expression froze. After thinking for a moment, he said, "In this world, being a good person means that you're not far from death, so it's not up to me. It's the world that chose me to be a bad person." Doesn't that mean that even if you want to be a good person, you still have to be a bad person just to survive? The Sea King heard and nodded. This was what he thought. The law of life in this world didn't allow the existence of good people, and good people would never have a good ending. But the real strong can decide whether they want to be a good person or a bad person. This is the right of the strong. It's often said that the more virtuous a person is, the more things he can carry. But in fact, the people at the top of this world aren't necessarily kind people. On the contrary, there are more evil people than good people. On the contrary, those who live at the bottom and struggle for food have warmth for each other. What do you mean? The Sea King's expression froze. What I mean is, kindness is built on the foundation that your strength is absolutely stronger than the other party. A weak person can't be kind to the strong. But to become strong, you can decide all your preferences, good or evil. No external force can affect your thoughts. This is what it means to be strong. That is true freedom. That was what Yin Lang pursued. He was pure and kind by nature. He walked out of the fishing village and wanted to bring happiness to his clansmen. However, he was weak and could only go with the flow. A good person would not be able to grow in this world. So he became an evil person and grew by killing. However, the end of his goal was kindness. He only wanted to become strong and then decide everything for himself. Do you understand now? Eldering looked at the Sea King and asked. The Sea King was silent for a while and nodded, not really understanding. In fact, his growth was completely different from Yin Lang's. He was born in the top force of the sea, the Mute Sea Nation. He didn't have to worry about food, and he didn't have to worry about the safety of his people. Because in that sea, they were the strongest existence, and all forces had to pay tribute to them. And what drove him to grow was ambition and the desire for revenge. But as he grew, the Sea King never thought about what it meant to be strong. Strong people were strong? That's right, but there was no upper limit to one's strength, and there was no way to measure how strong one was. Gods. But above gods were ancient gods, and above ancient gods were great emperors. Even the great emperors weren't the strongest. At this moment, after listening to Yin Lang's story and Elder Ying's explanation, he suddenly understood. The strong were the ones who could decide their own thoughts without being affected by external forces. Once they reached this stage, they were the strongest and also the ones who chose their own fate. Thinking of this, the Sea King couldn't help but nod again. I understand now. No, you don't understand. I don't understand either, because we have never reached this height. We can only guess the thoughts of the experts with the bodies of ants. It is precisely because we have never been there that we have no way to know whether it is really as we think. Looking at Eldering, the Sea King couldn't help but be stunned. Do your best. I think highly of your potential, and I believe you'll make a name for yourself. Just as the Sea King was about to nod, Elder Ing continued. Before you, I also thought highly of 5 forces. 4 of them died on this road to becoming strong, and the 5th is the Smoke Dragon Chamber of Commerce. They're in a more worrying situation now. The Sea King was speechless. The Sea King held back a curse in his heart, not knowing if he should say it. Just believe in yourself. It's useless to believe in me. At this moment, Elder Ing smiled and walked out of the spiritual cave. At this moment, the Sea King suddenly looked at Elder Ying's back and shouted, Elder, is the Acheron Chamber of Commerce good or evil? Exploiting many sea merchants, acting overbearingly, and even monopolizing many trade channels, cutting off the path of many forces to rise. It's a great evil, Elder Ing said without turning his head. At the end of the Acheron Chamber of Commerce, is it good or evil? The Sea King asked again. How would I know? I'm just a member of this evil force. How would I know if the person at the top is good or evil? Elder Ing replied impatiently. Just as the Sea King was about to ask again, he saw Elder Ying's figure disappear in a flash. He sighed helplessly. It was rare to meet a super old man. He wanted to ask to broaden his horizons, but it was obvious that Elder Ing didn't want to answer anymore. However, after listening to Elder Ying's words, the Sea King felt that he understood a lot. At this moment, he suddenly thought, will I be able to reach that step, become a strong person, and decide my own fate? An absurd idea even appeared in the Sea King's mind. Overturn the Acheron Chamber of Commerce and replace it. It's meaningless to speculate what others are thinking when they reach the end. Isn't it better to think with your own ideas? The Sea King couldn't help but shiver at this thought. What a wild idea. After spending so much time with the players, how did I become so unrealistic? I want to fly before I learn how to run. The player clan is brainless and unafraid of death. I can't learn from them. Chapter 511. After letting his imagination run wild, the Sea King looked at the Neptune's Pardon scroll in his hand. He was very clear about the power of this scroll. It was said that it was made by a demigod in the central ocean of Yellow Spring. Not only was it the symbol of the War Chamber of Commerce, but it was also a symbol of power. This was also the reason why each Yellow Spring branch only had 10 War Chambers of Commerce. As the Neptune's Pardon scroll was too rare, each branch could only get 10 of them. The Sea King could not help but smile. From now on, Langya Island would no longer be his opponent because they were no longer qualified. As long as he had this scroll, not only would his power increase to the next level, the War Chamber of Commerce would also be something that Langya Island could not afford to offend. Thinking about this, the Sea King walked out of the spiritual cave. When he arrived outside, he levitated into the air and flew to the coast. When the Sea King arrived at the coast, the Smoke Dragon Trade Association's fleet had already left. However, what left him dumbfounded was that a large wave of players were fighting with his subordinates below. What was even more outrageous was that many players swung their hammers at his warship while they were fighting. Several warships had already been destroyed beyond recognition. This scene stunned the Sea King for a long time before he came back to his senses. He quickly went forward to stop the players' crazy behavior. What the F***CK? The big leak is here. Brothers, speed up. Before Smoke Wolf left, he said that this guy is now part of the War Chamber of Commerce. Should we kill him? Don't rush. The Sea King is a growing leak. We can't kill him all at once. We have to do it slowly to maximize the benefits, understand? What nonsense are you talking about? Hurry up. The quality of the Sea King's warship is not as good as the Smoke Dragon warship, but the success rate is still relatively higher. Hurry up. After some discussion in the live chat channel, the players acted as if they could not see the Sea King. They swung their hammers and hammered even harder. This scene infuriated the Sea King. He immediately took out the Neptune's Pardon and shouted, "All of you stop. All of you stop. I don't want to be your enemy right now." The players pretended not to hear him and hammered even harder. After all, the warships in front of them were like mountains of gold to them. They would not stop unless they died. The Sea King could not help but grit his teeth. The current stage was the beginning of his development. He didn't want to be enemies with any powerful forces. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let Smoke Wolf go just now. If he had killed Smoke Wolf back then, the battle between the Smoke Dragon fleet and them would have started. It was very likely that he would lose the title of War Chamber of Commerce that he had just secured. However, it was clear that these psychopaths of the Player Clan did not care about this at all and began to act like hooligans again, although the Sea King did not offend them this time. However, the gamer's mentality was that the leeks were reared by them. What's wrong with harvesting them a little? Is there a problem? There was no problem at all. How could there be an old farmer who worked hard to cultivate without harvesting? Thus, the chives know the Sea King became angry. He immediately took out the Neptune's Pardon Scroll and began to read the words on it. As the golden characters jumped out of the scroll, the power of the sea was awakened, and a huge wave swept towards the players who were beating them. At this moment, the players could not help but curse in the live chat channel. He felt that the big leak was too much. He actually dared to beat up an old farmer. Was this how a leak should act? Mother asterisk cur, I'm going to die of anger. Thus, the players hurriedly swung their hammers and punched holes in the battleships one after another. They took advantage of the last moment before they died to quickly slaughter them. Under the huge wave controlled by the Sea King, a large number of players were slapped into the water and then torn apart by the whirlpool. Some were even blown into the air by the storm and killed in midair. When all the players disappeared, the Sea King's face was livid. Looking at the broken battleships, the anger in his heart was indescribable. This time, he did not offend the Player Clan at all, but he was inexplicably attacked. The Player Clan was all King psychopaths and hooligans. At this moment, Heisui's figure appeared from below and appeared in front of the Sea King. He said with a sad face, "Your Majesty, a total of 36 battleships have been destroyed. The rest of the battleships are more or less damaged." What exactly happened? The Sea King asked with a gloomy face. I don't know. The Player Clan was originally fighting with the Smoke Dragon fleet. Then, Smoke Wolf returned and left with the entire fleet. Before he left, he even told the players that the Mute fleet is now the War Chamber of Commerce. And then, the Sea King asked. Then, the Player Clan ignored them and continued to fight them. However, they did not catch up to the Smoke Dragon fleet. Then, I saw a group of people from the Player Clan whispering in the distance. Then, they turned around and fought us. No, I didn't fight us at all. They just smashed our ships. They're all lunatics. The Sea King could not help but scold them. The Sea King did not expect that Smoke Wolf's revenge would come so quickly. Just like that, the damage was transferred to them. Your Majesty, haven't the Player Clan always been friendly to us? What's going on this time? Heisui asked angrily. How would I know? They're all lunatics. How would I know what's going on in their heads every day? The Sea King could not help but glare at Heisui. The Sea King had a headache dealing with this evil force of players that traversed the two seas and roamed everywhere. They were simply gangsters and locusts. They were the cancer of the cancer. The Sea King felt a headache when he thought that he would have to face the Player Clan again. With the way the Player Clan worked, the Sea King felt that negotiating with them was not something that an individual could do. By the way, Your Majesty, I heard that they seem to call you chives. What does that mean? Heisui asked curiously. Chives? The Sea King was stunned when he heard that. Yes, what does that mean? Heisui continued to ask. Maybe it's just a nickname. There's no other meaning. The Sea King shook his head in confusion. He did not understand the deeper meaning at all. At that moment, the Sea King looked at the warships below. He had a helpless expression on his face. Then he sighed. Let's return to Exinamo Island first. We'll repair and upgrade these warships. After all, we're going to be sea merchants in the future. We can't just rely on sea beasts as mounts to fight. I know. Now that we have enough spiritual materials on the island, we can build a batch of high-level Spectre warships. Now that Your Majesty has obtained the qualification of the War Chamber of Commerce, the nearby sea merchants will definitely send spiritual materials over. We don't have to worry about resources. Sui was delighted when he saw the Neptune's absolution scroll in the Sea King's hand. Back then, he had already put his future on the line by following the Sea King. If the Sea King became stronger, they could also benefit from it. Your Majesty, do you have any plans for the player clan? Sui asked again when he thought of the player clan. Don't worry about it for now. Try to avoid fighting and focus on development. We'll discuss countermeasures when we get back. The Sea King felt a headache when he mentioned the player clan. He was quite happy when he saw the Smoke Dragon fleet fighting the player clan. However, it was a different story when he was involved in it. At that moment, the Sea King suddenly thought of what Eldering said before he left. Compared to the player clan, the Sea King suddenly felt that the player clan was indeed different. They did not follow the rules of survival at all. They did things according to their own preferences. Good and evil, strong and weak did not seem to exist in the eyes of the player clan. They just acted willfully and did whatever they wanted. However, even though they were so willful, the player clan was still fine. It was as if this clan had appeared to destroy the rules of survival in the underworld, bringing a hint of the word light automatically flashed across the Sea King's mind. After all, the player clan had no connection with the light. The most they brought to this oppressive and murderous world was the aura of idiots. He had learned the word idiots from the player clan. At this moment, he felt that it was too appropriate to use it on the players. Thinking of this, the Sea King suddenly felt that, if the player clan was allowed to continue to grow like this, would the cruel rules of survival in the underworld that had not changed for a long time be broken by the player clan one day? This thought shocked the Sea King. Sure enough, after being with the player clan for a long time, their thoughts became wilder and wilder. They even thought of changing the cruel rules of survival in the underworld. How could the player clan grow to that extent? The Sea King felt that he had to reduce his contact with the player clan in the future. It was too crazy. Not only did a bunch of new terms appear in his mind, but he also had wild thoughts similar to the player clan from time to time. This made the Sea King feel like he had been assimilated by the idiots. He suddenly felt flustered and exasperated. Your Majesty, what's wrong? Sui noticed that the Sea King's emotions were a little unstable. He could not help but ask cautiously. I'm fine, the Sea King said immediately. Although this was the answer, the Sea King began to think about this problem again. If the underworld was occupied by the idiotic player clan, what would happen? The Sea King could not help but facepalm. This scene was too idiotic, and he could not bear to look at it. At this moment, he thought of the scene of the player clan fighting each other over a disagreement. He also thought of the scene of the player clan fishing, treasure hunting, eating, drinking, and having fun all day long. In this cruel world of survival, the Sea King was not convinced that they could live so happily, but he was impressed by this group of idiotic player clan. It was as if their brains had been swung by a tail. They were so stupid that they could only be happy. But in the end, the Sea King suddenly felt that if all the forces in the underworld could be so idiotic and not kill, they would also be very happy. In his thoughts, the Sea King felt that the player clan was a malignant tumor. They were almost assimilated by his thoughts. This was too scary. Sui watched the Sea King's expression change between nervousness and happiness. He felt that the king must be too happy about obtaining the qualification of the War Chamber of Commerce. It seemed a little abnormal. On the player's side, the news of the Sea King becoming a member of the War Chamber of Commerce was quickly spread to the forum. At this moment, many players were dumbfounded. This feeling was like raising a small leak. Originally, they had to help fight off pests from time to time to prevent it from dying early. But one day, this small leak suddenly grew explosively. This could not help but make the players feel complicated. In the predetermined growth path of the players, the Sea King should first annex the forces of Langya, and then be harvested by them. Then, the Sea King would expand and strengthen, and then harvest again. In short, he would accompany the players throughout the process, grow together with them, and harvest again when the time was ripe. Again and again, an endless cycle. But this time, the script seemed to have gone wrong. Chapter 5:12. The Sea King's growth had obviously exceeded the players' expectations. Although the players were puzzled by this, they quickly understood the reason. After all, this world was running on its own, and the players were only participants, not the ones who were advancing the plot of the world. However, since the Sea King's script had obviously deviated, they had to correct it. As the most popular boss villain in the players' hearts, the Sea King was the first super strong enemy that the players encountered after Instant. During this period, the other opposing forces of the players had fallen one after another, but he had stubbornly stood until now. The players were both witnesses and promoters of the Sea King's growth. They were like children who were raised by one hand, which was why the players called him the firstly King of War. However, since the Sea King's growth had deviated this time, as an old farmer player, it seemed like he had to help correct it. After all, he was growing too fast, and the players were feeling the pressure. Hence, on the official forum, the players began to discuss how to harvest the Sea King in advance. Watermelon_Taro. Everyone, let's not go overboard. At the very least, don't let the Sea King lose the rights of the War Chamber of Commerce. Otherwise, I'm afraid that if we put too much pressure on the Sea King will not be able to recover. The leaks will go straight from the growth stage to the withering stage, and the losses will be huge. Laughing emoji, assassin_Creed. I don't care about the rest. I'm going to destroy the Sea King's ship first. After smashing a smoke dragon battleship, my battleship swallowed it, and it leveled up by 1.5 levels. The experience is incredible. Tong Gua's arrogant face. Roasting Chong, while hugging the Jade Rabbit. Yes, let's continue smashing the ship. We'll smash as much as he builds. It's time to absorb the Sea King's power for growth. Laughing emoji, Shiwili_the_strongest replied to Roasting Chong, while hugging the Jade Rabbit. What's your name? Do you have 2 different accounts? And there's another called Roasting Chong, while hugging the Jade Rabbit? I've been curious about this for a long time. Roasting Chong, while hugging the Jade Rabbit, replied to Shiwili_the_strongest. I'll hug and roast whatever I want. As for whether it's 2 accounts, you can guess. Crayon_Shinchan. Tisk, TSK. I feel like you guys are parasites on the Sea King's body. Now you guys are going to suck his blood again. The Sea King is so pitiful. He doesn't know anything and is still trying to fatten himself up for you guys to suck. Laughing emoji. Destructive fireworks. The Sea King is still very hardworking. His predicament stimulates his determination to become stronger. Actually, the Sea King is more like a treasure sword that hasn't been unlocked, and we players are the whetstones. We're giving the Sea King a chance to sharpen his blade. Isn't this a good excuse to suppress him? In the forum, many players posted their own suggestions on how to harvest the Sea King. Recently, the plundering development mode had been activated, and the strength of the players had increased rapidly. At that time, they had only targeted the Chamber of Commerce and the Smoke Dragon Force. But this time, the players had decided to include the Sea King. He would add this enemy that he had put aside for a long time to his list of enemies and suppress him. Hence, the Sea King was once again targeted by the players. The harvesting scythe was finally about to swing down. Coelong Ocean, Xinmo Island. The Sea King and his 6 subordinates stood by the coast, looking at his subordinates who were busy building new warships. At this moment, the Sea King's face was full of smiles. Just a while ago, Langia Island had sent a special envoy with abundant resources and spiritual materials. As for the Sea King who had obtained the authority of the War Chamber of Commerce, the allied forces of Langia Island naturally did not dare to make an enemy out of him. After receiving the news, they decisively chose to sue for peace. At the same time, the spiritual materials and resources from the major sea chambers of commerce in the nearby waters had arrived one after another. It could be said that the spiritual materials and resources in the Sea King's hands had doubled over the past few days. However, as for the allied forces of Langia Island, even if they took the initiative to sue for peace, the Sea King still did not have the slightest bit of mercy. Although he had accepted the batch of resources and spiritual materials, he did not agree to sue for peace. Instead, he made a request to the special envoy who had just arrived. He wanted 4/5 of the production points of the marine spiritual materials and treasures in the Coelong Ocean. This request could be said to be excessive. He wanted 4/5, and the remaining one-fifth would be divided among the major forces of the Kowloon Ocean. It was simply greedy to the extreme. Even so, the Sea King still had the confidence to make the allied forces of Langya Island agree, because the current him had the right to do so. Back then, he had almost died in the ambush of the allied forces of Langya Island. He had always remembered this grudge. After the conversation with Elder Ing, the Sea King now had a more ambitious goal. However, this goal was still too far away for him at the moment. He needed a huge amount of spiritual materials and treasures to support the consumption of his cultivation and the consumption of the development of his subordinate forces. Hence, from the Sea King's point of view, even 4/5 was still too little. If it was possible, he would want all of it. Of course, he would not execute this step so early. At the current stage, he needed to consolidate the development of his forces to prevent losing the title of the War Chamber of Commerce. Hence, he decided to stop the oppression of the allied forces of Langya Island. He would leave them a way out so that they would not fight to the death with him out of desperation. In this aspect, the Sea King was very thorough. He knew how to force his opponents into a desperate situation step by step. The initial sense of urgency from the encirclement of the allied forces of Langya Island had faded at this moment. The Sea King was very satisfied. At this moment, a green sea eagle flew over from afar. The ends of the green sea eagle's wings were imprinted with golden patterns. Its claws were also golden. At this moment, its sharp eyes were staring at the Sea King while it flapped its wings at him. Naturally, the Sea King also noticed the sudden appearance of the green sea eagle. His expression immediately froze. At this moment, the sea eagle swooped down. The Sea King stared at the sea eagle in silence and did not move his body. The approaching sea eagle flapped its wings and stabilized its body. A scroll fell from its golden claws. Then it flapped its wings and rose into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared from the Sea King's sight. Upon seeing this, Lan Hushan took a step forward and picked up the scroll. However, he did not open it. Instead, he walked to the Sea King's side and handed it over respectfully. Although it was the Sea King's first time seeing the green sea eagle, he knew its origin. It was the Netherworld Merchant Guild's soul-devouring sea branch's messenger. Although it was in the form of a beast, it had the strength of a ghost commander. This scroll was obviously the first mission given to him by the Netherworld Merchant Guild. With mixed feelings, the Sea King opened the scroll. Netherworld Devouring Sea Branch. Continue to investigate the Kowloon Sea Plunder incident and give the sea merchants an explanation. Mute Sea Merchant Guild accepts. As expected, they accepted the mission from the Smoke Dragon Merchant Guild and continued to investigate the incident. The Sea King felt a headache when he saw the contents of the scroll. Because in the Kowloon Sea, other than Tian Lan who had disappeared, the biggest plunder force was the player clan. It could be said that they were standing on the opposite side of the Sea King. However, the Sea King was not willing to fight the player clan just like that. After all, he had witnessed the outcome of the previous one. Starting a war with the player clan was obviously playing with fire. After interacting with the player clan for a long time, the Sea King felt that the player clan was fake. Their true strength was a mystery. If he were to start a war with the player clan, the Sea King was afraid that the power that he had painstakingly obtained would be taken away by the player clan. However, if he did not deal with it, he would not be able to give an explanation to the War Merchant Guild. How should he weigh the pros and cons and protect himself? This was a headache for the Sea King. Oh yeah, did you find Tian Lan? At this moment, the Sea King turned to look at the lords beside him. I didn't find him. It was as if he disappeared into thin air. I think he's dead or escaped from this sea. Sha Shui answered immediately. Hearing this, the Sea King felt another headache. He had already expected the Underworld Sea Merchant Guild's new mission. Therefore, his plan was to capture Tian Lan first and use her as a scapegoat for the player clan. This would temporarily calm the other merchant guilds down and also serve as an explanation to the Underworld Sea Merchant Guild. However, Tian Lan was nowhere to be found. She had even abandoned the powerful Nether Sea Kingdom's Stone Statue Legion. This indirectly confirmed the fact that Tian Lan was dead. Otherwise, why would she give up such an important military legion? However, The mess she left behind was troubling the Sea King. Just as the Sea King was thinking about how to deal with this matter, he suddenly turned to look at the horizon. In the distance, countless warships appeared. The Sea King and the lords beside him were very familiar with the warships' outfits. They were the warships of the malignant player clan. At this moment, the Sea King could not help but feel resentful. I'm trying to find someone to take the blame for you, but you're messing with me again. This feeling made the Sea King very uncomfortable. It was obvious that the player clan did not appreciate his actions. They were even ready to slap him in the face at any time. As for negotiating with the player clan, the Sea King immediately gave up on the idea. Negotiating with a lunatic? What a joke. Their way of thinking was not on the same level. Get ready for battle. Stop them and see what they're up to. Hei Sui and the other lords nodded immediately. Then, they turned around and headed toward the warships docked by the shore. After a moment of preparation, the Mute warriors boarded the warships and headed toward the direction where the player army came from. At this moment, the Sea King's figure appeared on the main warship. Looking at the player fleet from afar, the Sea King sighed helplessly. He did not want to speak anymore. How unlucky I am to encounter the player clan. As the two fleets approached each other, Hei Sui nodded at the Sea King. Then, he walked to the deck and was about to speak. However, he was shocked to realize that the players' warships were disappearing from his sight one by one. At this moment, the players' heads were moving on the surface of the sea. In their hands, they were still holding onto the black hammer that he found very familiar. Stop! Seeing this, Hei Sui immediately understood what the players were going to do. They must be trying to smash the ships again. Obviously, the players did not care about Hei Sui's angry shout. This was because the players were here for this. Have a taste of my sickle. Ha! Have a taste of my hammer. Cut! Armor-breaking hammer. Get an SSR. Lux possession hammer. Parts attached to the ship. Listen to my Lux call. Come out. The African players' angry roar. It's time to turn the tables. I don't know what to shout. I'll shout along with you. Ah! At this moment, the player army that was here to harvest leeks began to punish and smash the Sea King's warship. At this moment, the Sea King could no longer sit still. He shouted angrily and ordered the warriors on the warship to go into the sea to stop the players' crazy actions. Seeing this situation, the players were indignant. Leeks are biting us now. We've raised them for so long in vain. What ingrate! Although that was what they were thinking, the players' hands did not stop. They continued to smash the Sea King's warship with all their might. The live chat channel was filled with cheers from obtaining spare parts from time to time. Seeing this, the Sea King's eyes widened in anger. If you want to fight, I'll accept it. Instead of fighting, you would rather die than to smash my warship. What kind of divine operation is this? Chapter 5:13. While the Sea King was worried about the players, Lu Wu received a piece of good news. Number 1 was back. Number 1, who was specially sent by Lu Wu to collect the Emperor's mirror pages, lived like a bulldozer in America, digging holes and moving mountains. But this time, he brought back 5 incomplete pages of the human Emperor's mirror. Lu Wu had always been lazy when it came to improving his own strength, but with Bei Li's help, his method of improvement was always the best. The Emperor's mirror was once the cultivation method of the strongest people in the 3 realms. So it was not an exaggeration to call it the number 1 cultivation method in the 3 realms. It was good, but what worried Lu Wu was that these Emperor's mirror consumed a lot of soul coins to cultivate. Looking at the soul coins in the inventory, there were already 9 billion. Although these soul coins were frequently spent on the construction of the 4 major servers, they were still increasing steadily. As the strength of the player army increased, so did the rate of increase. This was something that Lu Wu was glad about. Now, even the latest server in the Asia server had a steady increase in the income from creating soul coins. Therefore, although the cultivation cost a lot, it was not something that Lu Wu could not afford. Although Lu Wu was distressed about the improvement of his own strength, he would not be stingy and resolutely analyze the 5 Emperor's mirror pages. Of course, the analysis step was naturally left to the almighty little Bei Li. This analysis cost Lu Wu a total of 780 million soul coins, and one of the pages cost as much as 400 million soul coins. Lu Wu's heart almost broke from the pain. Next, Lu Wu really felt the pain of the divine treasure entering his body. Each emperor's mirror corresponded to a human acupoint and opened a divine treasure in his body. Under Bei Li's analysis, the 5 golden pages slowly melted. When all the golden pages turned into golden liquid and began to seep into Lu Wu's body, Lu Wu suddenly screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Bailey could not help but hold her forehead when she saw this scene. She felt that Lu Wu's perseverance was not even as strong as the players'. It was like Bei Chen's blade. Even if his arm was forged with flesh and blood, and even his soul was integrated into it to make a weapon, he could still remain silent. He was a real man. There were many such examples in the game, but Lu Wu, as the boss behind the scenes, was the most lazy one. Although Lil Bailey knew that this step was very painful, couldn't she be a little stronger? Big Cat, stop howling. Can't you be a little stronger? As time passed, Bailey finally could not hold it in any longer. It really hurts. Lu Wu yelled in pain. Bailey thought of Lu Wu's past and looked at Lu Wu's current state. She was disappointed that Lu Wu had not lived up to her expectations. She even had the urge to throw Lu Wu into the game and train with the players. However, Bailey knew that it was not the right time. The current structure of the game was still too small. Although the players were developing rapidly, they were still occupying a corner of the game. The strongest regions, such as the Great Region of Hell, the Central Sea region of Yellow Springs, and the Great Region of Death in the Western Netherworld, had yet to be explored. From Bailey's point of view, it was too shameful to let the big boss behind the scenes appear in the early stages, and it was completely unnecessary. However, Bailey firmly believed that Lu Wu would grow and become the strongest. It was just that the battlefield that belonged to him had yet to arrive. The new battle of the 3 realms, the battle of the Outer Realms. Bailey started thinking about Lu Wu's growth path in her mind. She also started imagining how Lu Wu would lead the player clan to conquer the world in the future. Ah, I'm going to die. This is too painful. Lu Wu's howl interrupted Bei Li's thoughts. Bailey could not help but sigh. At the very least, this guy was still in a useless state. He was only capable of snatching her snacks. The only thing that comforted Bei Li was that she could see the change in Lu Wu's mentality. He could clearly identify the difference between his past self and his current self. Indeed, a powerhouse had to be nurtured little by little. In terms of nurturing, Lu Wu always felt that he was nurturing Bei Li, but Bailey felt that she was nurturing Lu Wu. At this moment, Lu Wu's body was floating in the artifact space. His body was covered in the golden liquid of the Emperor's mirror, making him look like a golden man. As the golden liquid seeped into his body, Lu Wu's 8 extraordinary meridians appeared in Bei Li's vision. 5 of the acupoints began to light up slowly. The impurities inside were flushed out, turning into black liquid that dripped down. Shorty, do you have any painkillers? No, I'll let you die from the pain. Bailey could not help but grit her teeth when she heard Lu Wu call her Shorty. Although he felt that his body was getting stronger, the pain was getting more intense. This torment lasted for more than half an hour before it stopped. When the golden liquid had completely seeped into his body, Lu Wu let out a long sigh of relief. He felt like he had just been tortured in hell, and now he was finally back to normal. Not bad. You've become stronger. Bailey nodded with a satisfied look on her face. Lu Wu immediately lowered his head and started the analysis. Lu Wu, Battle Artifact Owner. Gender, Male Strength Realm. Divine Treasure Level 6. Ghost King Middle Stage Abilities. Juvenile and I June, Fully Understood. Divine Treasure Body, 6. Juvenile and I June. With the help of the Dark Emperor Codex, you have completely obtained the inherited ability and physical strength of the ancient divine beast Juvenile and I June in its primary stage. Emperor's Mirror. Divine Treasure Body. Technique details. One of the 365 missing parts of the Emperor's Mirror. Each part of the divine treasure corresponds to an acupoint in the human body. Every time you obtain a part of the divine treasure, you can carve it into the corresponding acupoint and forge the immortal holy body. Technique hints. After the acupoints that nurture the divine treasure are connected, the power of this technique will be greatly increased. When all 365 acupoints are nurtured into the divine treasure and form a heavenly cycle connection, the body can be transformed into a realm. Opened acupoints: Shinzong acupoint, Baihui acupoint, Shinting acupoint, Taiyuan acupoint, Tsugu acupoint, Chiman acupoint. 6. Bestowed divine powers: immortal body, immortal soul. With the help of the Shinzong acupoint, the body and soul can complement each other. When the body is damaged, it can be repaired with the help of the soul. When the soul is destroyed, it can be repaired with the help of the body. 6 acupoints are connected. Effect: the body can be used as a boat to cross yin and yang. Divine powers analysis: after opening 6 acupoints, the body can break through the barrier between the heaven realm and the yin realm. It can travel back and forth without any medium. It can also break through the barrier between the 3 realms and travel to the outer realm. Unactivated Shinzong acupoint, 359. Xiaocheng acupoint, 2nd Lidue acupoint, Tsuchi acupoint, Yinggu acupoint, Xuehai acupoint, Yifeng acupoint. Lu Wu was stunned when he saw that his strength had reached the middle stage of the Ghost King realm. That's fast. Of course, you're the only one who improved your strength in the battle. The others grew with their own strength. Bailey shrugged helplessly. Lu Wu's face turned serious when he heard that. Nonsense. Look at the growth that I've gained from all the suffering I've suffered. Bailey's face was filled with disdain when she heard that. She did not speak but stared at Lu Wu. Lu Wu felt awkward. After thinking for a while, Lu Wu asked, "Fudi, you said that you'll tell me the truth when I'm stronger. What do you think of me now?" Lu Wu stretched out his right hand and flexed his biceps. Bailey shook her head expressionlessly. "You're still a weakling. With your strength, even the immortal emperor from the heaven realm won't look you in the eye." Lu Wu was a little dispirited when he heard that. He felt that he still had a long way to go to become stronger. "But I can tell you something about the emperor," Bailey suddenly said. "Speak." Lu Wu's eyes lit up when he heard that. "Who do you want to know first?" Bailey continued to ask. "I only know about Slayer. I heard it from the evil demon god. He seems to worship Slayer." Lu Wu could not help but roll his eyes. Bailey's eyes flickered when she heard the word Slayer. She took a deep breath and said, "The Emperor, Slayer, was a powerhouse before the 3 realms was formed. The human sovereign extermination was a powerhouse before the 3 realms was formed. He was also known as the human ancestor. He was the earliest human sovereign, and it was under his leadership that the human race rose rapidly. There are many legends about him, but one thing is for sure: he was the strongest person in the 3 realms. He was stronger than other human sovereigns, and he was also stronger than the immortal emperor of the heaven realm and the great emperor of the underworld." Lu Wu nodded and continued to ask, "I remember the evil demon god once said that he was known as the Sky Devil. He was plundering resources in the extraterrestrial realm. Why'd he do that? Wasn't he looking for trouble? It's great to be the overlord of the 3 realms. Why is he so murderous?" Bailey suddenly revealed her canine teeth when she heard that. "He's not murderous. He has a bigger goal." "A what goal?" Lu Wu was stunned and asked curiously. Bailey's eyes flashed with a hint of struggle. She seemed to be hesitating if she should say it. Looking at Bailey's expression, Lu Wu immediately gave up asking. He was about to let it go when Bailey spoke again. "Big Cat, what do you think the players rely on to grow?" "Plunder," Lu Wu answered without hesitation. "That's right, plunder. Do you remember what I said? The heaven realm and the underworld both have sacred artifacts that absorb the spiritual energy in the extraterrestrial realm, but the human world doesn't have them." "I remember, but what does this have to do with slaughtering and plundering the extraterrestrial realm?" "You're saying that Slayer wants to build a sacred artifact that belongs to the human world and the human race to absorb the spiritual energy in the extraterrestrial realm?" Bailey nodded and then shook her head. "It's not as simple as a sacred artifact. He wants to build a real race artifact that is countless times stronger than the heavenly axiom and the 6 paths of reincarnation. An immortal sacred artifact that can allow the human race to stand at the top of the extraterrestrial realm. For this, he needs countless resources. That's why he embarked on the path of plundering the extraterrestrial realm. He's sacrificed too much to nurture this immortal sacred artifact that can never be full. At this moment, Bei Li's expression turned gloomy. Don't tell me that the immortal sacred artifact that can never be full is you, Lu Wu asked in shock. No, I'm full. Bei Li immediately denied. I doubt it. Lu Wu continued with a doubtful expression. Upon hearing this, Bei Li's face turned sullen. Her little canine teeth were bared. So you'd better show some respect to Slayer in the future. Otherwise, you'll definitely regret it. Don't forget, he's the ancestor of the human race. I know. Lu Wu waved his hand to show that he understood. That glutton who created the heavenly axiom of the heaven realm and the 6 paths of reincarnation in the underworld. Or were they born naturally? Lu Wu suddenly thought of something. I don't know. Maybe it was Slayer too. Before he was born, there didn't seem to be 3 realms. I don't know how it was formed, but that's my guess. After Slayer was born, he accidentally came to the extraterrestrial realm and realized that he could absorb the spiritual energy from the extraterrestrial realm. He was troubled as to why there was no spiritual energy in the world he lived in. So, he installed a sacred artifact that he forged at the front gate, Heaven Realm, and another one at the back gate, Underworld. Did you see it with your own eyes, or did you guess it? Lu Wu could not help but ask. I guessed it. I wasn't born yet. Bei Li spread her hands helplessly. You old witch. You lied to me that you were 300 years old. I think you've lived for at least a few 100 million years. Lu Wu suddenly yelled. Upon hearing this, Bei Li could no longer hold it in. She leaped from the ground and bit Lu Wu's arm. Shut up. Die. Chapter 514. Now that the god had escaped, he couldn't order his clansmen to search for him. Otherwise, the Rahu clan would not be spared if the Heaven Realm found out about this. At this moment, Luoxio was helpless. He looked at the divine fire in his hand. A meteor-like flame streaked across the sky. It slowed down as it moved forward and landed on the ground. He moved his body slowly and lifted his feet. He gritted his teeth and wanted to move forward. However, he was only a few steps away from the defeated god of the Heaven Realm, but there was no external force that could help him. Next, as long as he fused with the flame, he would be able to cultivate the yin and yang spiritual energy fusion technique again. I'm an archer. I just activated my eagle eye and noticed that there seems to be someone in the fireball. What's going on? What Lu Wu needed to do next was to recoup the large amount of soul coins that he had burned to improve his strength from the players. At the same time, in the west of the land of the 9 luminaries, although the land of Rahu was powerful, the players were more familiar with the land of the 9 luminaries than the soldiers of Rahu clan. Moreover, the main purpose of the players wasn't a fight. They were just looking for opportunities to plunder some spiritual mines. At this moment, Luoxio could only lie on the ground and wait for his body to repair itself. From the initial calmness, the players' expressions gradually turned into horror as they discussed. At this moment, the motionless body of the god that was lying on the ground suddenly levitated into the air and flew toward the east. Whoever regained control of the body first would be greeted with death. He had 2 choices as to where he could escape to. However, after the arrival of the Smoke Dragon clan, the players' focus had completely shifted to the Battle of the Sea. Therefore, the land of the 9 luminaries had been relatively peaceful recently. Apart from a few players, there were basically no disturbances. Under the rule of the Rahu clan, all the spiritual mines and resources left behind in the land of the 9 luminaries belonged to them. At this moment, the players and NPCs in the Mansion of the Dead had naturally noticed the flame. They couldn't help but discuss about it. With the 18 layers of the realm barrier and the vast land area, it was the best place to hide. Although the players had a share of the profits from this battle, the resources that the players received were undoubtedly too little compared to the gains of the Rahu clan. She only said that the danger of the Outland would come, but she had no idea when it would come. Although he knew that he was not cultivating the Renhuang path, he did not give up on this method of cultivation. Therefore, Luoxio was prepared to wait until he had devoured and fused with the divine fire before killing it. From Bei Li's explanation, Luwu gradually gained a better understanding of the emperors of the ancient times. The extraterritorial Saint Spirit Dao is the cultivation Dao of a large extraterritorial clan. It is also a paramount Dao. This is the first time I've seen a shooting star in the game. I want to make a wish. Please let me obtain a legacy class. At that moment, the god's body suddenly fell from the sky and landed on the ground. The great Emperor of Feng Du still gave him an answer. He waved his hand, and the crimson blade immediately approached him, dragging the ball of golden flames with it. Just as Rashu was about to swallow the divine fire, he suddenly turned his head to look at the lifeless body of the god. After a moment of silence, the figure slowly stood up again, gritted his teeth, and walked towards the motionless figure on the ground not far away. Bomberman will die a horrible death. During this period of time, other than the huge amount of spiritual materials provided by the king of the Rahu clan for his consumption, the corpses of the 9 luminaries brothers had also become sacrifices for his rapid increase in strength. In order not to implicate others in this battle, he ordered that no one should come to help, including his brother, the king of the Rahu clan. A shadow of the Azura demon god appeared behind him, and then it left the body and pounced towards the god. Seeing this, a smile appeared on Rashu's face. He then reached out his hand and clenched it. Rashu clearly knew that while he was repairing himself, the god from the heavenly realm, who was lying not far away, was also repairing his body. Since North Sea could do it, why couldn't he? Therefore, after some preparation, he chose to kill the god again. However, at this moment, he actually lost his life. Just as Rashu was feeling puzzled about this, the figure disappeared on the spot and suddenly appeared in the sky. Then, it galloped towards the east. After staring at it for a moment, it swallowed it in one gulp. In just a few months, its strength had risen all the way from the Ghost King. This speculation sent chills down their spines. Therefore, this scene really frightened Rashu. By the time he reacted and wanted to chase after it, the god's body had already flown far away. It was already unrealistic to chase after it. He had planned for this battle for a long time. Therefore, a speculation appeared in their minds. The surroundings fell into silence again. Time seemed to be stretched out and became so unbearable. This was because the place where the fireball crashed seemed to be the mansion of the dead. As long as he could obtain the divine fire, he could walk on the path of supremacy again. Although this path was full of danger, he was willing to fight for it. Therefore, after completing the divine treasures in his body, Luwu once again sent number 1 out to investigate and find the remaining pages of the Emperor's Mirror. 9 glories. Luwu could not help but feel nervous when he heard it. After knowing that his speculation was wrong, Rashu suffered a huge blow. After some hesitation, he decided to go to the land of Naraka. As for the god who had lost the divine fire, since he had already escaped, he should just let him be. Without the divine fire, he could not cause any trouble. He might even be abandoned by the group of heartless gods in the heavenly realm. And it was time for him to start his life as a fugitive. Another immortal has come to the underworld. He was just a few steps away from obtaining the divine fire. With the advantage of speed, the shadow of the Shura demon god approached quickly and grabbed the god, pinching him in his hand. This made Rashu's face turn gloomy. As time passed, a wisp of blood was born in Rashu's body, which was already dry and clean. It began to swim in his body and nourish his withered body. Baki, the mansion of the dead. However, while improving the player's strength, he naturally would not neglect the improvement of his own strength. At that time, Rashu, who was unwilling to give up, asked the Emperor of Feng do again what path he was cultivating. That was exactly what he desired. With drowsy eyelids, he turned his head to look at the god lying not far away. With the help of the Shura eye, he saw the swaying divine fire in the god's body. At this moment, Rashu was confused. Looking at the flame, Rashu's face revealed a greedy look. After all, the strength he possessed at this stage was still unable to compete with the heavenly realm. Therefore, he quickly asked. Everything was fine a second ago. Suddenly, he heard a loud noise and the scene turned black and white. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. His strength was recovering bit by bit. Rashu closed his eyes tightly and prepared for a fatal blow. Just as Lu Wu was considering if he should organize a lucky draw, Bailey, who was still biting Lu Wu's finger, suddenly loosened her grip. She then said with a serious expression, "After the disappearance of the 9 Luminaries brothers, the history of this region had turned to a new page. It had once again returned to the peaceful times without any war. It seemed like he could not take these few steps anymore." Rashu felt that his body was completely out of control, even though he was roaring in his heart and wanted to walk towards the figure not far away. He fell to the ground again after taking a few steps. After leaving the Emperor's illusory world, Rashu returned to the 9 Luminaries. However, Bailey did not say much about the matters of the extraterrestrial realm. "Where is it?" Especially the players who stayed in the buildings. They died in a daze. Looking at this scene, Rashu was shocked. He initially thought that the fusion of yin and yang spiritual energy was the strongest path to become the Emperor, but he did not expect that to be the case. He was cultivating the path of the Emperor. Could it be that the Mansion of the Dead was blown up by the Bomberman again? In this battle, the gods from the heavenly realm were extremely powerful. Under the protection of a solid foundation, his strength broke through the Ghost King realm, then the Ghost Emperor realm, and reached the Demigod realm. At this moment, Rashu suddenly opened his eyes and reached out his hand to grab the god who was far away. No matter how strong his will was, he still could not support his powerless body. Thinking of the explosion just now, this speculation seemed to be very reliable. At this moment, some of the players could not help but curse in their hearts. Even though his comprehension of the Azura laws was extremely thorough, he had still paid a heavy price for it. The moment he became the king of Rahu, he met the Emperor of Fengdu and asked about one thing. Although he had once slain a god, the process of this battle was still extremely arduous. "Oh my god, run! Stop talking nonsense!" However, the answer he got was no. In order not to implicate the Rahu clan, after successfully slaying the god, he would not return to his clan and gave up his position as the king of Rahu. The moment the fireball landed, a huge crater was formed in the square on the east side of the Mansion of the Dead. The surrounding buildings were destroyed beyond recognition, and a large number of players were killed in the safe zone. As the divine fire and his body were violently repelling each other, Rashu began to think about his next step. Believe it or not, this is a new expansion pack, the precursor of an alien invasion. When this meteor lands, the new expansion pack will be activated. After that, he became the king of Rahu and was successfully crowned, receiving the blessings of the great emperor. As if caused by the falling meteorite, the ground on the west side of the land of the 9 Luminaries cracked and formed a huge crater. Magma gushed out from the crack, and everything around was destroyed. There was no sign of life, and it was a scene of doomsday. In his opinion, after being deprived of the divine fire, even if he was a god, he would not have any power and would be equivalent to an ordinary person. He should not be able to resist at all. This naturally caused a lot of dissatisfaction among the players. Therefore, before the Smoke Dragon clan arrived, the players would often go to the land of the 9 Luminaries to steal things. The reason why Rashu did not kill him after depriving him of the divine fire was to prevent his death from alarming the gods in the heavenly realm and causing another heavenly god to descend. When Rashu reached out to grab the fireball, he finally could not help but laugh out loud. As Rashu's voice fell, the shadow of the Shura demon god transformed into a crimson blade and pierced into the god's body. As the tip of the blade pierced through the barrier, it also brought out a golden dancing flame. However, his body was at its limit, and he fell to the ground after taking a few steps. A figure was standing in the center of the area. His body was moving up and down, and he was panting heavily. Lu Wu did not ask much about this, but he knew that the players were his trump card and also his weapon to fight against any forces. Even if he was deprived of the divine fire, he should not die so easily. He should still have a chance of survival. So why did his chance of survival disappear at this moment? Wait, did you guys notice? This fireball seems to be coming towards us. You're dead. Boom.